However, it was also at this moment that she saw Yun Jian killing one of Tai Jingang's underlings in a few moves after charging into the crowd. Then she went straight to Tai Jinggang. At the same time, Yun Jian held a butterfly knife in her hand. The blade of this butterfly knife was made from the god-vanquishing blade. It could kill everything in the world, even the gods of deity continent. Yun Jian held the butterfly knife and stood in front of Tai Jinggang. Tai Jinggang was ready to retreat, but when he saw the butterfly knife in Yun Jian's hand, Tai Jingang's eyes widened and he screamed in horror, God-vanquishing blade. Yun Jian, be careful. He's from Yulong mainland. Gu Nianji looked at Tai Jinggang and suddenly shouted at Yun Jian with widened eyes. Tai Jinggang reacted in the next second and realized that things were not as simple as he thought. Therefore, Tai Jinggang risked not being able to cultivate for 100 years and directly used the spiritual power of Yulong mainland on earth. What is that? The people standing in the distance saw this and were so scared that their faces turned pale. In the next second, Yun Jian's voice sounded, "You've lost." Her voice was cold as if there was no warmth at all. However, when Yun Jian came within 3 meters of Tai Jinggang, the spiritual power that Tai Jinggang had just used was instantly broken. He instantly became an ordinary person. In the next breath, the butterfly knife in Yun Jian's hand had already pierced Tai Jingang's heart. There was only one person in the world who could make someone from Yulong mainland lose their spiritual power within 3 meters of them. You're the witch goddess. Before he could say the word Lord, Tai Jinggang saw Yun Jian smile coldly and say the last words that Tai Jinggang heard in this world before he died. I said, you've lost. With that, Yun Jian withdrew the butterfly knife. Chapter 1278. With Tai Jinggang dead, Tai Jingang's underlings were defeated instantly. Especially with Lin Wei leading in Hun's ambush from afar with Qing Yu and Gu Nianji's help nearby. Tai Jingang's underlings were all dead in no time. Of course, following Yun Jian's initial wishes, Tai Jingang's underlings were all killed, leaving only one alive. Lin Wei and Shui Ying from afar rushed over with Hun's assassins. Watching Tai Jinggang being killed by Yun Jian just like that, Kai Lin and the rest who were standing afar saw Tai Jinggang use the spiritual power of Yulong mainland before he died. Tai Jingang's hand suddenly emitted a strong light, but he was killed by Yun Jian before the light could be released. Therefore, the people from afar only thought that Tai Jinggang had taken out something like a flashlight. After all, they were standing afar, and no one would have thought that Tai Jinggang came from Yulong mainland. This was because they did not even know of Yulong mainland's existence. This was an era where people believed in science. If they were to believe in another world, they would not believe in it unless they had truly seen and experienced it. That group of people. Seeing Lin Wei and Shui Ying leading in Hun's assassins from afar, Kai Lin and the rest were still trembling in fear, not daring to come out. Zhang Xiaofeng, Chen Xinyi, and Ling Yichen had seen more terrifying scenes than this. Although they did not ask Yun Jian directly, the three of them knew that Yun Jian was not a simple person. Moreover, Yun Jian knew some international figures. Especially when they saw C.E. Zhang Xiaofeng, and the rest understood immediately. Zhang Xiaofeng and the other two knew that C.E. was Yun Jian's boyfriend, so Zhang Xiaofeng and the other two walked out when they saw that Tai Jinggang and the others were dead. In the distance, Kai Lin and the others were scared out of their wits when they saw the corpses of Tai Jinggang and the others. How would they dare to come over? Suck up to Yun Jian while Yun Jian remained to let the young master Sing came up to her and grabbed Yun Jian's hand. Bring him back first and clean up the scene. Why didn't you tell me you're here? Shui Ying. With that, he caressed Yun Jian's head affectionately. He didn't care that Yun Jian's watching from afar still was envious of the gesture. He only had eyes for Yun Jian. Was good-looking, he was not on the same level as C.E. We're here to ride a horse. But it was a pity that Lin Ziheng was definitely richer than this good-looking guy. So he smirked. Just as she was thinking as long as he saw Yun Jian, had already pulled Yun Jian's hand and walked out of the racecourse. When Chen Xinyi saw this, she wanted to follow but was stopped by Zhang Xiaofeng and Ling Yichen with evil smiles on their faces. He tossed Tai Jingang's underling who was intentionally spared to Yun Jian and the crowd that was hiding in various places. Shui purposely put Yun Jian in front when he addressed her because he knew that the young madam's current status was even higher than the young master's. Zhang stepped forward. If the young madam wanted the young master to kneel and sing conquer, the young master would not reject her. Chapter 1279. Uncle Zhang took the card from Shui Ying's hand in a fluster and heard Shui Ying's words. Compared to the dead Tai Jing gang, the appearance of Shui Ying, Lin Wei, and the rest was more frightening. Because they had guns in their hands. More importantly, they were more powerful than Tai Jing gang. Most importantly, Tai Jing gang was so powerful. He was actually killed by Yun Jian from their class. He was actually killed by Killing God from the Advanced Special Forces. In the past, they had only heard of Killing God's prestige, but today, everyone present had witnessed Killing God's ability. That was beyond what a person should be capable of. What Shui Ying said at the end made everyone present even more stunned. 10 million USD? 10 million USD for hush money? Did his family own a bank? How could he give out 10 million USD at once? As Yun Jian spoke, she wanted to let go of Siyi's hand that was holding her. Qi Xiaoxiao's eyes widened in shock. Made her blush and her heart race. Shui Ying was the subordinate of the handsome man just now. Even if it was his subordinate, the hush money would loosen 10 million on Yun Jian's hand. Her boyfriend Lin Zihang's pulled her into the passenger seat of the Lamborghini and drove Yun Jian back to Qi Xiaoxiao recalled how she had bragged about bringing Lin Zihang to Yun Jian's mesmerizing face from the corner of her eye. Then. A small smile gave 10 million USD as hush money. Just as Yun Jian smiled at CE, she heard him say, "You're going to the International Underground Tea Party in 3 days." After Uncle Zhang accepted the 10 million USD, it was not a question, it was an affirmation. Sharp eyes scanned Yun Jian was stunned. Although he was handsome and she had not told CE that she was going to the tea party. Ferocious. In spite of it, therefore, the people standing around didn't dare to step forward. She knew that CE had never attended such ferociously and purposely made the people around him shudder. To attend any of then he fiddled with the gun in his hand and said, "Never shown his face. Today I was planning to kill all of you." CE for so Hearing Shui Ying's words and recalling the mass he did not like to attend such everyone events. Trembled. That was why she did not tell of young madam, "I won't kill you." She thought that CE would not go. If anyone dares to say a word about what happened today. 1280. Yun Jian knew that CE didn't like to attend such grand events. The sound of a gunshot reverberated through the sky. When she heard CE's grabbed a pistol and fired a shot into the sky without even looking. She was silent for 2 seconds before she said to CE, "This is the outcome. I know you don't like to go to such events. According to Han's rules, they were supposed to kill all the witnesses." She knew that CE didn't like such events. If all of Yun Jian's classmates were killed to do something, it would definitely cause a commotion. She was very clear about her feelings. Initially, it would not affect even say out loud at all whether it caused a commotion or not. She liked him a lot. But the problem was also because of this that Yun Jian didn't want CE to forcefully accompany her to places he didn't want to go. City as well. If CE didn't mean anything at this moment, Yun Jian had already been dragged to the Lamborghini by CE. She actually wanted CE to attend the event with her. Yun Jian asked softly. Jian's gaze was fixed into the Lamborghini. The car was moving forward. She paused for a moment before continuing. The windows were closed and the interior of the car was cold. To Cindy. After she said this, she didn't hear CE's voice for a long time. Yun Jian paused. She was about to turn to look at CE. Screech! There was an emergency braking sound. Yun Jian's eyes met the car's. In the next moment, the car came to a stop along the road like a flash of lightning. This was done in a single night. In the next moment, Yun Jian felt herself being embraced by a firm chest. Yun Jian was stunned for 2 seconds as she felt this firm chest embrace her. CE suddenly reached out from the driver's seat and half-hugged Yun Jian. His fresh and pleasant scent wafted into Yun Jian's nose. Yun Jian subconsciously reached out to hug him back. She only felt a warmth in her heart. This strange and touching heartbeat sounded again. At this moment, CE's magnetic voice came from above Yun Jian's head. "No matter how much I dislike the occasion, as long as I'm with you, I like it." He didn't shout these words loudly, nor did he act like a teenage boy and girl who wanted everyone to know about their sweetness. CE only spoke his truest thoughts in the right place in the right situation. Just like that, like a normal conversation. However, it was CE's truest thoughts that made Yun Jian's heart thump. You. Yun Jian's heart trembled slightly. She could feel her heart beating wildly. What CE said made her heart flutter, or perhaps she was touched. "You," was all Yun Jian could say before she was rendered speechless. After a few seconds of silence, she asked a rather dumb question, "Why are you so nice to me?" This question was rather stupid. Perhaps it was because Yun Jian didn't know what to say at this moment, so her brain short-circuited and she asked such a question. Yun Jian regretted it the moment she finished speaking. Was she stupid or something? How could she ask such a stupid question? However, just as Yun Jian asked this question, CE suddenly reached out and placed his hand on the back of Yun Jian's head. With one hand on the back of Yun Jian's head, he lowered his head. Yun Jian could only feel an overwhelming kiss coming down on her. Her lips were suddenly blocked by an ice-cold pair of handsome lips. His handsome lips didn't linger on Yun Jian's lips for too long. It was almost like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water against Yun Jian's lips. Then Yun Jian saw CE's fair and flawless handsome face. Chapter 1281. Si Yi's words were easily misunderstood and Yun Jian's cheeks flushed instantly. Drive. My mom made dumplings. Let's go home for dinner. Yun Jian gave the playful Si Yi a shove. She had tacitly agreed to let Si Yi accompany her to the tea party. Moreover, there was a hint of womanly vibe in her tone when she said that. It tickled Si Yi's heart again. The woman he had been longing for was right in front of him, but all he could do was watch and drink without getting to know her better. In the afternoon. It was a really so she naturally had to ask now that she was nowhere to be seen. Recalled how Mo's son had interrupted his and Yun Jian's moment back in Yulong mainland. It's all thanks to her this afternoon, suffocated, or else I wouldn't have been able to handle it alone. Si Yi waved her hand gently in front of Si Yi's eyes and said with a good child is here. Let's drive. Qin Yuru said happily. My mom said this morning that we should go home for walking over from afar. Qin Yuru called everyone to her bowl of dumplings, planning to make a pot of dumplings tonight and have dinner together as a group. This child happened to be here today as well. Pitiful. It was only then that Si Yi reluctantly shifted his gaze away from Yun Jian from now on. The steering wheel to start the sports car's engine. This child can have a home. As for his Xiao Jian, there was still a long way to go. Had thought of earlier. One day he would get to know her better. Chapter 1282. Yun Jian's house. The meaning behind that statement was self-explanatory. Without Lan Su's help, understood at once and told her as well. With a sudden realization, when Lan Su was still around, Lan Su would often follow Qin Yuru around and snickered as she teach her all sorts of things. Actually, I don't have trouble making dumplings. Si Luo was still a little afraid of to be made tonight, so she spoke up. With Lan Su's help in the past, Si Luo recalled Shui Ying's sudden disapproval when she wanted to stay with Qin Yuru cutting the celery. Si Luo turned to Yun Jian immediately and asked Yun Jian for help. Si Luo was already at Gujun Jian and Qin Yuru's house. Si Luo did not know that Yun Jian was not staying at Gujun Jian and Qin Yuru's house. She sat alone in the living room looking a little scared. She only knew that Yun Jian had the water in the kitchen was boiling. She was dragged away by Shui Ying before she could ask for help the last time. Who was sitting in the living room. She did not want to stay with Shui Ying anymore because he was too scary, especially that scar on his neck. Si Luo looked over when she saw that Qin Yuru was calling her and nodded at Qin Yuru submissively. Yun Jian smirked and hinted at Shui Ying before boiling water into the kettle. Qin Yuru smiled at Si Luo. Her hands never stopped same as not asking at all. Si Luo ran over to help when she was a girl. By the time Yun Jian and Si got home, Shui Ying and Lin Wei were already back. And don't even think who had gone out for a walk as expected. Shui Ying dismissed Si Luo's idea decisively, and the rest were all home. The reunion dinner was very enjoyable. Set up a huge round table for everyone to sit at, but she had a great time eating as well. Halfway through the meal, were already seated at the round table. Get ready. Just as Yun Jian and Si Yi sat down to the military school in 2 days. Bowls of dumplings from the kitchen and placed them in front of their seats. But Gujun Jian continued to explain. Eat slowly. Freshmen in the military school start at a different time from regular high schools. Just turned around when freshmen in regular high schools usually report to school a week earlier and go through a week of military training. However, the military school's military training lasts for a month, so you have to report to school in early August. You'll be in the military school for the next month, then you'll start classes like regular high schools in September. Gujun Jian explained to Yun Jian in detail. Gujun Jian then turned to Si Yi. Since you're enrolled in the military school, you're in your senior year and you don't have to go through military training. That's because the military school is closed. Which means that you can't visit her during the month of military training. These matters had to be handled according to the military school's rules. Even if Si Yi's identity was extraordinary, Gu Junjian meant that Si Yi had to bear with it for a month without seeing Yun Jian since he had said it out loud. Okay, Si Yi agreed without hesitation. He had agreed to it directly because he wanted to see Xiao Jian. Who could stop him? Gu Junjian meant that he could not meet Xiao Jian openly. Who could stop him from seeing her secretly? Got it. Yun Jian nodded. Yun Jian's skills were improving in actual combat, but she knew that she was still not strong enough. She was not as capable as she was in her past life, but she was not far from it. Yun Jian would not let go of any chance to improve her skills. Military training was excruciating to others, but to her, it was something she could not ask for more. Dinner was over quickly and Qin Yuru cleared the table quickly. Si Luo helped to clean up the table the entire time. Si Luo was a deaf girl. After the meal, everyone went back to their own homes. The tea party was held 3 days later, so Yun Jian planned to depart early the next morning. At night, Shui Ying pulled Si Luo back to his place with a grim expression. Chapter 1283. Before Si Luo could finish her sentence, Shui Ying interrupted her. Are you afraid of me? As Shui Ying spoke, he took a step closer to her and spoke in a muffled voice. Shui Ying felt very anxious now. He really wanted to grab this stupid woman and give her a good scolding, but he couldn't bear to do it. Si Luo saw Shui Ying take another step closer to her, and she took another step back in fear. Then, her hands hung by the sides of her pants. She shrank her head and glanced at the ground beside her. I'm not. You're not? Shuang repeated. At the same time he stood in front of Si Luo again. Shuang reached out and pinched Si Luo's chin, forcing her to look at him. At this moment Shuang was already standing next to Si Luo. Shuang could even smell the mint fragrance coming from her body. Si Luo was about to cry. She was really afraid of Shuang. Especially the long scar on Shui Ying's neck. What kind of injury could leave such a deep scar on his face? Look at me. If you're not afraid of me, then look at me and tell me that you're not afraid of me. Shui Ying pinched Si Luo's chin and forced her to look at him. He was a little impatient, but he didn't want to hurt her, so he pretended to be fierce and shouted. Sob sob I. Si Luo was frightened by the snow eagle's aura. She shuddered then shrank back. Shui Ying got angrier the more he looked at her, especially when he smelled the minty scent on Si Luo's body. He then looked at Si Luo's beautiful eyes with long eyelashes. Shui Ying reached out his free hand. It looked as if he wanted to slap her. Si Luo suddenly remembered that she was beaten up when she was begging. She shrank back in fear and closed her eyes. Tears even came out of her eyes as she screamed. Ah, don't hit me, please don't hit me. I'll be good, boo-hoo. Shui Ying was stunned by Si Luo's reaction. After he recovered from his shock, he reached out his free hand and pressed the back of Si Luo's head, pulling her head towards him. In the next second, Shui Ying kissed Si Luo on the lips. Si Luo thought that Shui Ying was going to hit her, but he actually kissed her. Si Luo's eyes widened. Si Luo was dumbfounded. Shui Ying didn't kiss her for too long. After he kissed her, he immediately realized his mistake, so he quickly moved his lips away. Shui Ying punched the wall next to Si Luo as he recalled what he had just done. The hand slammed down hard and even the white powder on the wall fell down. Si Luo shrank back in fear and covered her face with her hands. Si Luo only opened her eyes when she didn't hear anything after a while. She then saw Shui Ying looking at her with his dark eyes. She shrunk her neck, trembling. At this moment, Si Luo could see the scar on Shui Ying's neck up close. Those were terrifying scars intertwined together, revealing a huge scar. Just looking at it from such a close distance was enough to frighten people. Si Luo shrank back again, and her hand couldn't help but caress the terrifying scar on Shui Ying's neck. Si Luo was scared to death. She wanted to hide in fear, but when she saw the terrifying scar on Shui Ying's neck, she couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Does it hurt? Si Luo asked. Her face was filled with sadness. Si Luo was a very pure girl. She didn't even know what it meant when Shui Ying licked her lips a few times. Shui Ying immediately grabbed Si Luo's wrist when he heard what she said. He curled his lips and smiled at her. Are you worried about me? No, if your family saw you injured like this, they would be very sad. Si Luo frowned as she looked at the scar on Shui Ying's neck. He must have been in a lot of pain when he was injured so deeply. I don't have any family. Shui Ying's expression changed at the mention of family. As he spoke, he didn't stop what he was doing, but his expression became more ferocious. If it weren't for this deep scar, Shui Ying's looks would only be slightly less handsome than Si Yi's. After a pause, Shui Ying said harshly, if it weren't for my family and name, I wouldn't have this scar and been ridiculed since I was young. Shui Ying's words were harsh, but they touched Si Luo's heart. Tears streamed down Si Luo's face when she heard what Shui Ying said. Chapter 1284. Si Luo started crying without warning after hearing Shui Ying's words. Shui Ying panicked when he saw that. He hurriedly wiped Si Luo's tears away. To be honest, it was Shui Ying's first time wiping away a girl's tears. He used to hate girls who cried so easily. However, Si Luo gave him a different feeling. For some reason, Shui Ying panicked when he saw Si Luo's tears. It was as if something precious to him was crying. Furthermore, the girl's minty scent wafted into his nose. Shui Ying felt like he was going to be possessed. Shui Ying couldn't help but reach out to remove Si Luo's hand that was rubbing his eyes. He used his other hand to gently wipe away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Shui Ying panicked when he saw Si Luo's tears streaming down her face. What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Shui Ying's question made Si Luo cry even harder. Si Luo wanted to hold back her tears, but she couldn't no matter how hard she tried. She sobbed to Shui Ying. Why are you so pitiful? Don't your family want you anymore? Was your injury caused by them? It must hurt a lot, right? As Si Luo spoke, she reached out her delicate hand and gently placed it on Shui Ying's neck. Although she was afraid of the frightening scar on his neck, she still held back her tears as she asked, What's wrong with you? He loved sleeping beside him. Wasn't faking it. He only touched truly sad for a while but did not do anything excessive. It was Shui Jin's first time he went to bed early because they were preparing to leave for the tea party the next day. And wanted to shrink away. Yun Jin and Si she didn't want to go home with him and wanted to cry. Qingyu was going to go with Yun Jin as well. Of her tragic past, Gunyanji was left behind in Longmen City by Qingyu. Shuang didn't know how to comfort her. They were sent back to an Han in his arms and gently stroked Shuang was back. It doesn't hurt had just woken up when Yuni called her to the garden outside the villa. Skipped a beat when Shuang knew that Yuni had come because she really was going on a long trip with her. However, this feeling was new to her. Yuni looked at Yun Jin and never gone to school. Xiao Jin, where she was adopted by her foster parents, and she was young and she was locked up at home to do manual labor. Yun Jin's gaze dimmed, so she didn't even know the difference between boys and girls. But at this moment, Si Luo stopped crying. She raised her hand but didn't know where to put it. He was silent for a while and hesitated to the ground, stunned. No one had ever hugged her like this since she was young. When she was young, everyone would only beat her and scold her. Regardless of whether it was the children or the adults, they all despised her. They said that she often did manual labor, was dirty, and had bacteria all over her body. No one was even willing to approach her. Si Luo was completely stunned. Shuang had never thought that he would actually hug her. But the faint scent of mint wafted from the girl's body, and Shuang couldn't bear to let go. No one knew what was happening here. At this moment, Yun Jin and Si were sleeping on the same bed, but nothing happened. Chapter 1285. Yuni thought about it for a long time before he finally decided to ask the question. He had been wanting to ask for a long time about whether Yun Jin was his biological sister. It had been almost a year. It had been almost a year since his little sister had changed until today. What was his sister like in the past? She was timid, weak, and useless. But what about his sister now? Her brilliance was dazzling and her ability was terrifying. Even everything that happened after that. In the beginning, Yun-yi thought that his sister had changed and that she was just hiding her timid and weak personality. However, Yun Jin's actions later made Yun-yi deeply suspicious. However, because Yun Jin's appearance did not change, Yun-yi did not have any suspicions at first. However, until today they had been together for almost a year. No matter how much a person's personality changed, it was impossible for it to change so drastically. Initially, Yun-yi wanted to wait for Yun Jin to tell him herself. There was a pause before he could not wait any longer. Yun Jin was stunned by Yun Yi's sudden question. Emotions were like a roller coaster right now. Questioning gaze, his heart was clenched tightly. She had never hidden herself in front of Yun, and he had become a completely different person. Yun Jin did not plan to do so from the beginning. Those who had never experienced this would not be able to understand this feeling. Asked her, she planned to tell Yun the truth. Chapter 1286. However, looking at Yun Yi's nervous face, opened her mouth. Yun Jin felt that she was wrong. Every word that came out of her mouth she did not really tremble violently. And Qin as her family in the beginning, so she was not afraid in the beginning. She continued. She even thought that if her identity as Yun Jin was not exposed, I'm an underground agent who kills without God had always been a homeless person. The person standing in front of you is not your biological sister life and was never tied down by the daughter of a rich guarantee with my intelligence. Just an underground tied down by the born family with Yun Jin's worst managed to survive through life and did not want to say that she was not Yun Jin. However, when the day comes, Yun is not afraid that you'll hurt me and lowered her eyes. I just want to know that finally used an outsider's clone to tell Yun her identity in detail. Yes, no one knew better than myself how much ability and courage it took to survive and to assassinate an organization like Yun found out and hated her. She wished so much that she was just an ordinary junior high school student and chased her away. With a brother who doted on her, just like Yun and a mother who loved her, just like Yun was not someone who could not let go. Outsiders respected her only because they saw her so openly. But to be honest, she didn't even have the right to choose whether to live or die back then. Even when he was mentally prepared when he asked the question, he was still stupefied when he actually heard it through exams like middle school and college entrance exams. Where did my real sister go? She also couldn't be like an ordinary student to replace my sister's identity after finishing high school and college. A series of questions. Yun Jian had lived in a world of swords and his voice sounded calm, but if one were to listen closely, she didn't have the right to choose her career. One could hear the raspiness. She didn't even have the right to choose whether to live or die. She could only rely on her own two hands. She could only use her own two hands to kill everyone who stood in her way, and then fight for the right to live. This was her life and also her childhood. Outsiders only saw their glamorous, cool and terrifying killing skills. But who could have seen how she had survived the massacre? So after she was reborn, she came to an ordinary living environment, an ordinary family and an ordinary school life. She was greedy. Just like how many people who didn't know her world wanted to explore her world and her living environment, she also wanted to experience the life of an ordinary person. When Yun Jian said that she was an agent of an international underground organization, Yun Yi's heart trembled. He didn't expect that the person in front of him wasn't his sister, but such a terrifying existence in the world. But after listening to Yun Jian's words, Yun Yi could even feel the loneliness in Yun Jian's words. She had no one to rely on and no one to rely on. To Yun Yi, the memories of a year with Yun Jian were more than 10 years' worth of memories with him and his sister. Even after knowing the truth, Yun Yi still felt that Yun Jian was his biological sister. He clenched his fists, but Yun Jian was already speaking to him in a normal tone. When I woke up, I possessed your sister's body. Chapter 1287. Yun Yi's words touched Yun Jian. It was an experience she had never experienced before. Yun Jian nodded heavily, looking at Yun Yi. She did not expect Yun Yi to say something so touching. Yun Jian never shed tears, but there was a glint at the corner of her eyes now. Of course it was just a flash. No matter how shaken Yun Jian was, she would never shed tears in front of others. Alright, Xiao Jian, aren't you guys going somewhere? You should leave now. Yun Yi was no longer as hesitant as before now that everything was out in the open. Although his younger sister's whereabouts were unknown, there was nothing he could do, so he let it go, but he would never give up. When Yun Jian saw Yun Yi suddenly opening his mouth to smile at her in an attempt to lighten the tense atmosphere, she regained her usual emotions. Go, I'll leave first, Yun Jian turned to tell Yun Yi before she walked out of the parterre. Okay. Yun Yi nodded. Yun Yi then thought of something and stopped Yun Jian. Xiao Jian, I won't object to where you guys are going, but I only have one request. You guys must go there safely and come back in one piece. Yun Yi's words tugged at Yun Jian's heartstrings. Yun Yi was not worried about anything else. He was only concerned about Yun Jian and the others' safety. This touched Yun Jian, so she looked at Yun Yi and nodded. Go, I promise you. No matter what happens in the future, I'll come back alive. Yun Yi did not ask her where she was going or what she was going to do. He never asked about it, but he was essentially the same as Qin Yiru. They only wanted Yun Jian to be safe. When Yun Jian came out of the parterre, Ci was leaning against the Lamborghini sports car with his back against it. He was leaning his legs against the short Lamborghini sports car leisurely. His tall and lean figure was handsome no matter how one looked at it. He watched as Yun Jian walked toward him. Why were you gone for so long? Ci asked softly when Yun Jian came to him, holding Yun Jian's hand as he spoke. I talked to Gu for a while. Yun Jian smiled at Ci with her eyes crinkled. Now that she had both kinship and love, this was the life she had yearned for in her previous life. Ci did not probe further. He patted Yun Jian's head softly with his large hand and pulled Yun Jian into the car. Other than Ci and Yun Jian, Xueying and Qin Yu were also there. Xueying reluctantly left Si Luo at Qin Yiru's house. Before he left, he reminded Si Luo that he would pick him up when he returned. He was afraid that Si Luo would stay at Qin Yiru's house and refuse to leave. Every international underground tea party was very dangerous. Even if the people who rushed to participate were not powerful secret agents or killers, they were still well-known figures in the world. Some minor assassins and secret agents would attend as well. Of course, these people did not have any status. Most of the time they were directly ignored. When they arrived at the airport, CE parked the Lamborghini at the management area and the four of them boarded the plane to Country B. Every year, the tea party would be held in a country with the poorest economy in the world. War could break out in that kind of country at any time. Of course, if one had to ask why, it was because in a prosperous country, something unpleasant would always happen at the gathering of assassins and secret agents. When the time came, if someone killed someone or if someone killed someone with a bomb or a cannon, no one would care in a poor country. This was exactly what they wanted. Chapter 1288. Country B. Kaluki. Just as they got off the plane, Yun Jian and Ce felt the fundamental difference between Country B and Country Z. In short, Country B's economy was more backward. The average income per capita was not high and most of the people were black. Although the income was not high and the country was in dire straits, the people of Country B lived in harmony. Their lives were tough and they might only live in straw huts. Changing their beds every 10 years was something only the wealthiest family in the village could do. In Country B, however, everyone helped each other. Money was paramount, but sometimes, no amount of money could make up for a favor. Just as Yun Jian, Ce, Shuiying, and Qingyu got off the plane, they saw Country B's people working hard on the streets, helping each other to move fruit trees. Some of the women in Country B wore headscarves while others did not. In Country B, women did not have the rule that they had to wrap themselves up completely before they could go out. In some countries, women's social status was so low that young girls had to wrap themselves up completely, only showing their eyes when they could go out. Of course, this did not exist in Country B. Yun Jian, Qingyu, and the rest were Asian. They were not white, but they were not tanned either. Their skin was just right. Of course, walking among the crowd in Country B, Yun Jian, Qingyu, and the rest attracted a lot of attention. Even so, no Country B's people would greet them. Sister Jian, Master sent me the address. She's not here yet. She wants us to go over first and stay at the host's guest house, Qingyu told Yun Jian after receiving Snake Lizard's message. Qingyu was discovered by Snake Lizard in the Kosha mercenaries, and her poison skills were personally taught by Snake Lizard. Therefore, the master Qingyu mentioned was Snake Lizard. Okay. Yun Jian nodded. Then the group went to the guest house they had agreed on. The guest house was provided by the organizer of the underground tea party. Yun Jian, Ce, and the rest arrived 2 days early as the tea party would only begin 2 days later. Therefore, Yun Jian, Ce, and the others could stay in the guest house provided by the organizers. After all, in a destitute country like Country B, there was not even a hotel, let alone a place to stay. This guest house was a very high-class temporary apartment built by the organizers. Of course, the organizers also spent some time building this apartment. After all, this apartment was built according to the structure of a 5-star hotel. The interior decoration and soundproofing were definitely top-notch. As soon as they entered the guest house, a receptionist standing at the front desk handed Yun Jian and the others the keys to 4 rooms. The people who attended this gathering were all internationally famous people, so Yun Jian and the other 3 didn't even need to reveal their identities at the front desk to get the keys to the apartment. Of the 4 rooms, only 3 were needed. Si didn't even go to his room. Instead, he shamelessly went to Yun Jian's room. The apartments here also provided hot springs. The service could be considered top-notch. Yun Jian, on the other hand, wanted to take a bath. The hot springs here were separated for men and women. Without Yun Jian by his side, Si had no interest in the hot springs at all. Yun Jian changed into a swimsuit and a conservative bathrobe over it before going to the hot springs for women. Chapter 1289. Yun Jian was also very clear that the people who could come to this public women's hot spring must be insignificant. It was impossible for ordinary big shots to come here to soak in the public hot spring. Of course, Yun Jian was not excluded. But this was also one of the points that Yun Jian was better than other big shots. She never treated herself as a big shot. It could be said that Yun Jian would usually blend into the ordinary crowd first and then find out the details of some people in the crowd. For example, coming to the hot spring was the best place to find out the details. Of course, the most important reason was that Yun Jian tried to find out something that she should not know from others. Back to the topic, Yun Jian had already arrived at the public women's hot spring with her bathrobe. As soon as she walked into the public women's hot spring, she saw the vast hot spring in front of her. The hot spring covered a large area, about the size of 5 or 6 ordinary classrooms in a school. The hot spring was not purely natural but man-made. Of course, all the investment was provided by the organizers. And all the high-end equipment here was only to entertain the big shots from all over the world. There were already many people soaking in the hot spring, and this place was exclusively for women. Yun Jian's appearance quickly attracted the attention of many women present. After all, Yun Jian's looks were stunning even if she did not wear any makeup. Of course, the women in the hot spring came from all over the world in various countries. Some countries had different aesthetic standards, so Yun Jian was only the center of attention for a while, and the women quickly looked away. Yun Jian took off her bathrobe and revealed her swimsuit. Her sexy and curvy figure was vividly displayed. After Yun Jian took off her bathrobe, she put it away and went into the hot spring. There were at least a dozen hot springs here, and Yun Jian only picked one that was more pleasing to the eye. As soon as she went into the water, 5 or 6 women immediately surrounded Yun Jian. Yun Jian lowered her eyes and pretended not to see. One of the women stood in front of Yun Jian. She pointed at Yun Jian with a murderous look on her face. Then she said to Yun Jian in English, "This hot spring belongs to Sister Sheena. I'll give you 3 seconds to get out of this hot spring, or you'll die here." Saying so, the 5 to 6 women formed eagle claws with their hands, Each of them unleashed their killer moves at Yun Jian. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She still didn't move. His initial judgment was that these women were all low-level assassins or secret agents. This was not Country Z, and the women in front of her were not trying to intimidate her. Killing people was a very common thing for everyone here. Therefore, after these 5 or 6 women surrounded Yun Jian, all the women who were soaking in the hot spring looked at Yun Jian as if they were looking at a dead person. They seemed to be waiting to see Yun Jian being torn to pieces by these 5 or 6 women. Hey Maggie, this is my friend. Save me some face and don't kill her. She's a little immature. I apologize. Yun Jian was still soaking in the hot spring. The 5 or 6 women surrounded Yun Jian and were already planning to attack Yun Jian, who was not moving. The people here were very realistic. What should they do to disobedient people? Then they would use death as a warning. At this moment, a woman in her 20s ran over from not far away. She walked over and grabbed Yun Jian. She apologized to the leader of the 5 or 6 women and dragged Yun Jian to another hot spring. Yun Jian did not refuse. She did not intend to expose her identity. Until the woman in her 20s, who looked quite sweet, pulled Yun Jian to another hot spring, the woman breathed a sigh of relief. Then she smiled at Yun Jian and said, "My name is Doya, and my Chinese name is Gusiki. I see that you're also from Country Z, right? You don't know, but the identities of those people just now are shocking. They even know the middle-level personnel of the kosher mercenaries. You can't afford to offend them. Phew, luckily I pulled you back in time. Otherwise you're really done for. You'll definitely be killed by them." Doya breathed a sigh of relief. Then she introduced herself to Yun Jian and explained the situation just now. Chapter 1290. Doya turned her gaze to Yun Jian after that. Just as Doya was about to say something, Yun Jian thanked Doya. "Thank you." Doya grinned at Yun Jian's gratitude before waving a hand at her. "Hey, it's no big deal. We're all from Country Z after all." Doya then moved closer to Yun Jian and pointed at a few women in a hot spring. She then said to Yun Jian, "Let's sneak over there. Let's sneak over there. Those are my friends." She'll lower your voice. "Don't let Maggie and the others see us." Maggie was the leader of the group that surrounded Yun Jian with 5 or 6 women. It seemed that Doya was quite afraid of Maggie and the others. Yun Jian knew that Doya had pulled her to another hot spring just now to avoid Magi and the rest's line of sight. Doya noticed that Maggie and the others were no longer looking at her and Yun Jian. She then decided to bring Yun Jian back to her friends. Okay. Yun Jian naturally didn't refuse. "Then let's go." Doya pulled Yun Jian's hand and ran to the hot spring where her friends were like a big sister, avoiding the attention of Maggie and the others. Yun Jian followed Doya's footsteps the entire time. At this critical moment, if Yun Jian or Doya made any noise, Maggie and the others would come looking for trouble again. This was the bloody world that Yun Jian lived in her previous life. People with power and authority would rush up and kill whoever they didn't like or tease them before humiliating them to death. Therefore, even if Doya had saved Yun Jian from Maggie just now, there was no telling if Maggie and the other women would make a comeback. Doya heaved a sigh of relief when she brought Yun Jian to the hot spring where she and her friends were. "Doya, you really saved this girl?" one of Doya's friends said lazily as Doya pulled Yun Jian into the hot spring. Yun Jian immediately looked up and saw a woman whose breasts were so big that even her swimsuit couldn't cover them. She was looking at her with her arms crossed. "You can't even take care of yourself and you still want to save others. Doya, do you know how dangerous it was just now? Maggie and the others aren't simple people. Especially Hina. Hina's old flame is from the Inhun organization. Most importantly, they know people from the kosher mercenaries. Also, I heard that even the boss of the Western Underground black market owes Hina a favor." A woman in a bikini started scolding Doya after the woman with the big breasts finished speaking. They were a group of low-level assassins who couldn't afford to offend anyone, because it would bring about a fatal disaster. Among all the people present, Hina, who was the sister Hina that Maggie mentioned, was the one with the highest status. Therefore, every woman in the hot spring was in awe of Hina. Before Yun Jian came, Hina killed a woman like Yun Jian who everyone thought was self-righteous. Doya's friends thought that saving Yun Jian from Hina's follower Maggie was a very risky thing to do. Doya waved her hand and smiled before her friend finished speaking. "It's fine. Maggie owes me a favor. I was very safe just now." With that, Doya lowered her voice and told the group with a pat on Yun Jian's shoulder. "Besides, I don't want to see such a pretty girl get killed by those people." Chapter 1291. Yun Jian didn't say anything. She quietly listened to the people in front of her talking about how Doya saved her. After listening to their conversation, Yun Jian could already conclude that Doya was the kindest among them. However, her kind personality wasn't suitable for this path. If Doya continued to maintain her kind heart, Yun Jian was sure that she would lose her life one day because of her kindness. Doya, we don't want to see any killing or death. However, your actions not only put you in danger, but if Hina intervened, we would all die here. It's true that you saved this little girl, but you should think about it carefully. We're assassins, not charity workers. The big-breasted woman whose breasts couldn't even be covered by her swimsuit spoke to Doya very seriously. She wasn't targeting Yun Jian. Instead, she wanted Doya to see the truth. They weren't strong enough to save anyone now. If Maggie didn't owe Doya a favor just now, not to mention Doya, even Doya's friends would have to die here because of Doya's meddling. Doya was stunned. She couldn't speak for a long time. Finally, Doya was silent for a while. She was about to say, "I promise this is the last time." Well said. A clear female voice interrupted Doya's words and reached the ears of Doya and her friends. When Doya and Doya's friends turned to look at the source of the voice, they saw Yun Jian leaning leisurely on the shore of the hot spring. She closed her eyes and said those 3 words faintly. Everyone present was stupefied for a moment. Did they hear wrongly? This little girl actually said that she was well said? She said that the big-breasted woman's words were well said? Everyone present was criticizing Doya for saving Yun Jian. In the end, the little girl actually agreed with the big-breasted woman's words? Everyone was dumbfounded. If it were anyone else, they would probably be furious after hearing what the big-breasted woman and the woman in the bikini said. After all, the big-breasted woman and the woman in the bikini wanted Doya to not save Yun Jian and let Yun Jian be killed by Maggie's group. In the eyes of the big-breasted woman and the woman in the bikini, if Doya didn't save Yun Jian just now, Yun Jian would definitely die. Due to Yun Jian's age and her seemingly ignorant face, everyone felt that she must be a newbie from some assassin or secret agent organization. However, what Yun Jian said surprised everyone. She actually spoke up for the big-breasted woman and the woman in the bikini? Is she stupid? Just as everyone was thinking that, they heard Yun Jian's voice again. Yun Jian's words were directed at Doya. From my point of view, I should be thanking you. However, from the assassin's point of view, your kind actions just now will bring you a fatal disaster sooner or later. She's very right. You're assassins, not charity workers. Yun Jian's simple words made everyone present gulp. No one expected this teenage girl in front of them to have such a deep understanding. Yun Jian didn't give off the feeling of a newbie assassin or secret agent who had just debuted. Instead, it felt like Doya and Doya's friends felt their hearts tighten at this moment. Everyone instantly had an unknown illusion. Chapter 1292. However, everyone quickly dismissed this idea. After all, Yunjian was still young. She couldn't have started training when she was still in her mother's womb, right? So when they thought of this, they didn't think that Yunjian was some big shot on the international stage. When the big-breasted woman heard Yunjian's words, she suddenly liked Yunjian's character very much. Previously, Yunjian didn't say anything and Doya's friends obviously didn't know Yunjian, so they treated Yunjian like a stranger. However, just now Yunjian's words shocked everyone. Doya was also silent for a few seconds. Yunjian leaned against the shore of the hot spring. She looked at the reactions of the women around her and didn't continue speaking for a while. Until this delicate atmosphere was interrupted when a slender and beautiful hand reached out to Yunjian. The big-breasted woman reached out to Yunjian under everyone's gaze. She narrowed her eyes slightly and looked at Yunjian. That pair of beautiful hands had already reached out to Yunjian. She said, "I said something unpleasant just now. Now I apologize. I hope you don't mind. Also, my name is Maina. I'm from country M." This big-breasted woman, Maina, intended to bury the hatchet with Yunjian. From the beginning she was hostile to Yunjian, but now she wanted to be on good terms with Yunjian. "Little girl, your words are quite pleasing to the ears. I was wrong just now. I shouldn't have said that. Let's be friends. My name is Charlotte. I'm from country Y." The woman wearing a very thin bikini also followed the example of the big-breasted woman and apologized to Yunjian. At the same time, Charlotte also reached out a hand to Yunjian. When Yunjian saw this, she only smiled slightly. Then, she shook hands with Maina and Charlotte respectively and nodded to them under the gaze of Maina and Charlotte. "Hello, my name is Yunjian. I'm from country Z." Then, Doya's other friends also introduced themselves to Yunjian. They were already familiar with each other. "Then we're friends, huh?" Charlotte smiled at Yunjian. Maina stood in the middle of the hot spring. She took 2 steps and her huge breasts trembled. If there was a man here, he would definitely have a nosebleed from the sight of Maina's huge breasts. Since Charlotte said so, Yunjian didn't hold back. Yunjian obtained a lot of information from Doya, Maina, and Charlotte. For example, some big and small figures would appear at the tea party 2 days later. When they were about to come out of the shower, Charlotte suddenly grabbed Yunjian's hand and said to her, "Yunjian, I'm going to take a shower. By the way, Yunjian, you have to be careful. Don't mess with Hina and Maggie, the group of people you just messed with. You can't underestimate their status. You have to be careful." Charlotte thought that Yunjian was just a small assassin or secret agent who had just debuted. Charlotte sincerely treated Yunjian as a friend, which was why she held Yunjian's hand and reminded her repeatedly. Charlotte was doing it out of kindness. Yunjian naturally accepted her kindness. "Okay, I know. Are you done soaking? We can go back to our rooms now," Charlotte said. Thus, Yunjian and the others put on their bathrobes and planned to go out of the hot spring. Just as they reached the entrance of the hot spring, more than 10 women rushed in from outside. These women took a deep look at Yunjian, and the leader turned her gaze to Maina. "Catch her." The leader fiercely ordered the people beside her. Maina didn't even know what was going on, and she was caught by the leader's people. Yunjian narrowed her eyes, but she didn't make a move. Slap. The woman in the lead suddenly gave Maina a slap. Nah. Doya was shocked. She wanted to rush to Maina, but she was stopped by Charlotte. Chapter 1293. It was obvious that Maina did not know the woman who had suddenly asked her men to grab her and slap her. Who am I? I'm the daughter of a European arms family, Mira. The woman who called herself Mira asked her men to grab Maina and gave her a hard slap. She was the daughter of a European arms family. This woman who called herself Mira had a higher status than Hina and was even more difficult to deal with. Doya, Charlotte, and the rest were horrified. Maina was so scared that her whole body trembled. Maina was so scared that she trembled violently. At the same time, the huge cleavage in front of her chest bounced up and down twice. Mira was even angrier when she saw that. Mira lifted her leg and kicked Maina's huge chest hard. She then walked over and pulled Maina's hair. How dare you ask me who I am? My man's soul was hooked when he saw you this morning. I'm here to teach you a lesson today. If I see you again, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. Mira said as she turned around to look at Yunjian, Doya, and the rest like a rich lady. To be honest, Yunjian could attack, but she would expose her identity if she did. Exposing her identity before the tea party would definitely put her in danger. If the identity of Slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent ranking, was exposed, it would definitely make the world tremble in fear. There were many people in the world who were afraid of Yunjian. However, there were even more people who wanted Yunjian dead. Therefore, if she exposed her identity now, she would be on the verge of death. After all, she would be staying here for a few days. If she exposed her identity now, she would definitely not be able to stay here anymore. Because at that time, wouldn't there be a lot of people who wanted her dead? She would not even be able to join the tea party this time. Therefore, Yunjian did not attack. She could not be blamed for being selfish. She would not expose herself to death for a friend whom she had only met once. When Mira looked at her, Yunjian's eyelid twitched slightly. The women in the spa watched the scene as if they were watching a show. None of them came to help. Mira's slap on Maina's face was so heavy that it made Maina's mouth bleed. Based on what Mira said, Maina was not wrong at all. That was because Mira's man was attracted by Maina's breasts, but Maina didn't do anything. Even so, Mira could openly beat up Maina or even kill her. This was the dark world of Yunjian's previous life. If you're weak, don't even talk about reason, you don't even have the right to say no. She's your friend? At this moment, Mira suddenly pinched Maina's chin and turned her head towards Yunjian. When Mira saw Yunjian's beautiful appearance, her jealousy as a woman soared to the extreme. No, she's not my friend. Look at how trashy she is. One look and you can tell that she is the weakest person in the circle. How could she be my friend? Maina was stunned. Then she looked coldly at Yunjian and laughed. Behind her back, Maina was hinting at Charlotte with her eyes, asking the latter to take Yunjian and leave quickly. Maina said those words because she did not want to implicate Yunjian. Yunjian's eyes twitched. She did not expect Maina to say those words to Mira to protect her. If Maina admitted that she was her friend, Mira would definitely shift her attention to her. That way Maina would not have to suffer. But Maina did not. Is that so? Mira said as she lifted her leg and kicked Maina to the ground. Chapter 1294. Yunjian did not clench her fists nor did she show any signs of worry for Maina. It was because of this that Mira believed that Maina did not know Yunjian. Otherwise, Mira would have found a random reason to drag Yunjian into this. Charlotte, on the other hand, clenched her fists in the dark. She watched her best friend Maina being beaten up by Mira's men, but she could not do anything. They had agreed earlier that if any of them were to get into trouble, they would not step in if they could reduce the damage. Charlotte, Doya, and the rest felt as if their hearts were being pierced by a knife, but they held it in and did not do anything. It would be useless even if Charlotte and Doya did anything. They would only add to the number of injured. Mira, who was standing in front of him, was the daughter of a European military family. Her status was even higher than Hina's. They could not afford to offend her. They were just a group of low-level assassins. They could only accept their fate if they were to encounter someone like Mira who had the same status as them. Yunjian was shocked, but she did not do anything. She did not expect Maina to go to this extent for her. However, if Yunjian was someone who changed her mind because she was touched, she would not be standing here alive right now. There were countless people who wanted to assassinate her and make her reveal her weakness because she was touched. In spite of it, Yunjian had never been fooled. The first condition for her to be ranked as the top international secret agent, slaying God, was that she could not be touched by anyone and forget her original intention. What? Aren't you guys leaving? Could it be that you are her friends? Is that why you can't bear to leave? Mira noticed that Yunjian and the rest were not leaving. She suddenly laughed out loud and asked sensitively, "If that's the case, then this woman lied to me, right?" Myra's smiling face fell instantly. Mira suddenly turned around and stepped on Maina's chest. She then stomped her foot on Maina's huge breasts a few times. Doya almost could not stand it. She wanted to rush forward to save Maina. However, Yunjian caught her. If Doya ran over now, it would only add to Mina's punishment. It's just that we haven't seen such an exciting show in a long time, so we couldn't help but take a few more glances, Yunjian said to Mira as if she was an outsider. Mira instantly lost her interest. She glared fiercely at Yunjian, then turned around and ordered her subordinates to leave. Maina was lying on the ground moaning in pain. No one cared about her. After Mira left, Yunjian was the first to walk up. Doya, Charlotte, and the others quickly helped Maina up. Doya, Charlotte, and the others felt as if their hearts were being stabbed by a knife when they saw Maina's injuries. They would only be bullied if they were not strong enough. Fortunately, they were still alive, so they wanted to become strong. "I'm sorry," Yunjian told Maina softly as she watched Doya and Charlotte slowly help her up from the ground while squatting on the ground. She was very sorry. She could have stopped it, but she did not. Cough, cough. Maina coughed a few times. Then she forced a pale smile and said to Yunjian, "You little brat, why are you apologizing? This has nothing to do with you. She's just jealous of my breasts, ha." Maina even joked as she shook her huge breasts that were about to jump out of her clothes. Yunjian lowered her eyes and did not say anything. Then they helped Maina back to her bedroom. Yunjian applied medicine for Maina and then returned to her room. As soon as she entered the room, she saw Ce sitting on the sofa. He was wearing a bathrobe. It seemed like he had just taken a shower in the bathroom. The water on his hair flowed down his neck and into the bathrobe on his firm chest. His fair and handsome face was even more handsome. Chapter 1295. Ce had been sitting on the sofa just now, looking aloof like a handsome man who had walked out of a comic book. His handsome face, coupled with his cold and arrogant face, if women were to see him at this moment, regardless of whether they were old or young, they would probably want to pounce on him fiercely. Yunjian was not an ordinary woman. She sucked in a breath but did not lunge at him like a madwoman. Even if Ce was already Yunjian's favorite in her heart. It was the fondness she had for her beloved. On the other hand, Ce, who had maintained his aloof demeanor just now, stood up and walked over when he saw Yunjian. His aloof demeanor vanished in an instant as he grabbed Yunjian's hand and whispered to her, "Xiao Jian." Her voice was so soft that it was as if she was his master. Ce called out and pulled Yunjian into his arms. Just as he did so, however, Ce's hand accidentally touched the belt of Yunjian's bathrobe. The bathrobe Yunjian was wearing was only held together by the thin strap. This time, Ce had really tugged her belt off by accident. Once the belt was pulled off, Yunjian's bathrobe slid to the floor. Yunjian was wearing a swimsuit underneath that showcased her proud figure. Ce felt like a part of him was swelling violently when he saw what was happening. Xiao Jian. Ce, who was usually calm, was panicking. It was fine if he was not panicking, but once he did. Ce's hand was originally going to rest on Yunjian's slender waist, but it slipped and accidentally landed on Yunjian's butt. The swimsuit that Yunjian was wearing happened to wrap around her buttocks, making it rather sensitive. Yunjian blushed and slapped Ce's hand away, taking 2 steps toward the bed. Halfway there, she turned her head, her blushing cheeks pink as she told Ce coquettishly, "Don't follow me or don't get on my bed." Yunjian only wanted to express that she did not want Ce to come to her room and sleep on the same bed as her. In spite of it, Ce's lips curled up even more when he heard Yunjian's words. The night passed uneventfully. Ce merely hugged Yunjian to sleep, sometimes touching her but never doing the last step. After staying in the guest house for 2 days, the 3rd day of the 3rd underground tea party was held in the morning. August 1, 1999. Yunjian, Ce, Shuang and Qingyu all woke up early in the morning. The guest house was already filled with people and the tea party was being held in a large ballroom not far from the guest house. Although it was called a ballroom, it was actually a high-class venue that was built at the last minute. The environment was naturally not bad, comparable to the most luxurious villas in Country Z. The tea party would be held from morning until 12 o'clock at night, so the tea party was in progress now. Yunjian and Ce went to the ballroom where the tea party was being held. Today she did not have to hide her identity anymore, because she was leaving after the party today. Just as Yunjian and Ce arrived at the entrance of the ballroom, they heard a blood-curdling scream and saw a large group of people crowding around to watch the show before they even stepped through the entrance. Yunjian could vaguely make out the word, "not," in the shrill scream. Her eyelids twitched as she suddenly had a bad feeling. Yunjian quickly pushed through the crowd and saw Mira standing smugly in the middle of the crowd. There was a pool of blood in front of her and a woman who was no longer breathing lay in the pool of blood. The woman's voluptuous breasts had been cut off and lay naked in front of Mira. Chapter 1296. In the beginning, Doya and Charlotte could still pretend that they didn't know Maina like they did 2 days ago. But now it wasn't as simple as a normal lesson. Maina was killed by Mira. Maina was dead. The reason was because Mira was holding the hand of the man standing beside her and accidentally bumped into them. That man took a few more glances at Maina's breasts like before. Because of this, Mira ordered someone to humiliate Maina and cut off her breasts in public. Maina died on the spot. This was the result of a person without power and influence going up against a person with power and influence. The surrounding people looked at Maina's disfigured breasts with relish. No one sympathized with Maina. They even thought that she deserved it. Because Maina was a weakling. She deserved to die because she was weak. Ah. You evil woman. You'll die a horrible death. Nah. Ah. Apart from the others' indifference, Doya and Charlotte had the deepest feelings for Maina. At this moment, Doya and Charlotte had already roared madly and wanted to rush towards Mira, but they were firmly held back by their other friends. Mira was the strongest here, so if Doya and Charlotte were to charge at Mira without reason, they would be sacrificed for no reason. In this bloody world, if you didn't have power or influence, you could as long as you were strong enough to kill the enemy's army. But if you couldn't and didn't have power or influence, there were many people who would end up as miserable as Maina, or even more miserable than Maina. Yo, do you guys want to be played to death by me like this woman? Mira looked at Maina's breasts that she ordered someone to cut off. She glanced at Doya and Charlotte and said in a sarcastic tone. Mira didn't know what she had done wrong. She raised her leg and stepped on Maina's chest that had been cut off. Puff 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 puff. The breasts were trampled into paste by Mira in front of everyone. It also took away the last shameful moment in Maina's life. Blood splattered everywhere. Doya, Charlotte, and the others cried even louder. However, the surrounding people who were watching the show were laughing as if they had seen a perfect show. Some of the men even laughed lecherously and sighed, Sigh, such a beautiful woman, how nice would it be if we could take turns to ck her to death. What a pity for her big breasts. As he spoke, the evil man gestured with his hand. In this lawless world, Maina was humiliated even after her death. But no one could help her. Yunjian had just made her way through the crowd when she saw Mira and Charlotte being hugged tightly by a few friends who were equally sobbing but rational. They were wailing in agony, but they could not avenge Maina. When she clearly saw the scene just now, although her expression did not change in the slightest, her heart was fiercely touched. Yunjian pushed her way through the crowd and came to Doya and Charlotte. Looking at them, she asked faintly without saying anything, "Tell me what happened just now." The more Yunjian stayed silent, the more her heart did the opposite. She still remembered that when she was kidnapped by the organization in her previous life, she had a good friend. She couldn't remember the name of the little girl. She only remembered that every night when she was kidnapped, the little girl would hug her and comfort her not to be afraid. The little girl once said, "I'm here, don't be afraid. We'll be fine. We'll definitely be able to go home." In that world, the word, home, was harder than ascending to the heavens. Yunjian was not born a murderous maniac. She had been cowardly and scared before. Later on, the little girl died. Her limbs were cut off by the other girls in the organization and her heart was dug out. Chapter 1297. The little girl had died for Yunjian. Originally, the person who had died was Yunjian. Just like Maina, Yunjian did not provoke anyone. However, when she was in the organization, she attracted jealousy because of her extreme talent. At that time, Yunjian was 7.5 years old. She was extremely talented, but everyone was jealous of her. Hence, the group of girls organized many other girls to frame Yunjian. They placed the item on Yunjian's bed and insisted that Yunjian had stolen it. They wanted to kill Yunjian. Yunjian's talent was extraordinary, but she could not withstand the attacks of so many girls. In order to save Yunjian, the little girl had all her limbs chopped off by the group of people. Her heart was dug out on the spot. The group of girls were children after all. When they caught the little girl and saw Yunjian's pained expression, they forgot that their initial goal was to kill Yunjian. They even thought that it would be more interesting to keep Yunjian alive and slowly torture her. Hence, they killed the little girl in front of Yunjian that day. Yunjian had lived 2 lives. She would never forget the last words the little girl shouted at her before she was killed. "You must live. You must live. I beg you, you must take me home." The little girl was older than Yunjian. She was already 9 years old at that time. Her life had come to an end before it even began. Yunjian and the little girl were very small at that time. Their only wish was to find their way home. It was also from then on that Yunjian began to change completely. She no longer needed friends. She was no longer weak and useless. She understood that she had to fight for everything herself. In the following year, Yunjian began to train crazily. She killed all kinds of children around her to force herself to live. In almost a short year, the children who were abducted into the assassin organization with her when they were 5 years old all lost their lives to her flying daggers. Children kept coming in from the organization. However, those who came in were living people. When they came out, they were cold corpses. It was already very fortunate that there were corpses left. 8 or 9 out of 10 people couldn't even find their bodies. After that, she debuted at the age of 12 and officially took over assassination missions as an agent. Everything that happened after that has already been mentioned. She began to turn into an out-and-out homicidal maniac, an emotionless killing machine. When his soul returned to reality, he saw Maina lying in a pool of blood in Myra's face. Yunjian's heart surged with an unknown anger. As she recalled Maina, Yunjian felt as if she had seen a little girl protecting her. Sensing Yunjian's murderous intent and sadness, Ce held her hand. Doya and Charlotte, who stood rooted to the ground, were already so mad that they couldn't speak. In the end, it was Charlotte who tried her best to calm her breathing towards Yunjian. However, she panted heavily as she spoke to Yunjian. She killed Na. Her man wanted to see Na's. She said that Na seduced him. So just now she had people cut off Maina's breasts in front of everyone and humiliated her to death. But for some reason, Charlotte couldn't bring herself to say the rest of her words. Isn't she just a slut? So what if she killed her? Mira stood in the distance and said coldly. Then Mira turned her gaze towards Yunjian. She was provoked by Yunjian's perfect face and skin, and her jealousy rose again. Mira looked at Yunjian. Just as she was about to say something, she saw Yunjian suddenly let go of Ce's hand and walk over. Myra's heart skipped a beat. Then you can go die. Yunjian walked over very slowly and said this sentence faintly. Chapter 1298. From Yun Jian's expression, she looked very calm. However, those who knew her knew that she was about to get angry. Hee, you want me to die? Mira suddenly sneered. Because of Myra's high status, the surrounding people immediately shouted in shock. Who's that little girl? She actually dared to challenge Miss Mira, the daughter of Europe's military family. I think this little girl will die a horrible death. Tiske, just like that woman who overestimated herself, her breasts will be cut open while she's still alive. Why don't we go and negotiate with Miss Mira and ask her to let us have some fun before she kills this little girl? All the men standing around were saying disgusting obscenities. Before Maina's death, not only did the people around her not help her, but one of them even kicked Maina back to Mira when she desperately tried to escape. The crowd couldn't wait to watch a free and exciting show. This group of shameless people were still saying shameless things. However, just as they were saying this, the man who suggested to negotiate with Mira and sell Yun Jian out for everyone to have some fun before Mira killed Yun Jian suddenly had his head pressed down by a slender hand. After that hand pressed down on the man who was fantasizing about Yun Jian, the other hand fiercely slapped the man's head, directly fixing his head and twisting his neck. Gotcha. The man died on the spot. The whole process didn't even take 3 seconds. And this person was killed by the owner of this pair of slender hands. The person who killed him was undoubtedly Ce. Ce's face darkened as he directly killed the man. The surrounding people were so frightened that they took 3 steps back. They weren't afraid of Ce killing people but of Ce's superb skills. One more word and you'll go to hell. Ce coldly spat out this sentence. Among this group of people, Ce was one of the tallest. However, among this group of people, Ce was without a doubt the most handsome one. Because they had never seen Ce in this kind of underground gathering, the surrounding people thought that Ce was weak. However, when Ce walked over from afar and killed someone in 3 seconds, the people around them dared not utter a word of nonsense anymore. On the other side, when Mira saw that Ce who was with Yun Jian was so powerful, her arrogant and despotic attitude instantly collapsed. Seeing Yun Jian walk towards her step by step, Mira was afraid. However, her years of arrogance made Mira unable to lower her head. She suddenly pointed at Yun Jian and shouted at Yun Jian, "You! Stop right there. I'm the young mistress of Europe's arms industry. My father's firearms influence covers the entire Europe. If you dare to attack me today, I'll make sure you die miserably." Mira was frightened by Yun Jian's aura. Some people were born with a strong aura. Just their aura alone was enough to make people retreat 3 feet in fear. Yun Jian was such a person. Yun Jian didn't say anything. She continued to walk towards Mira. Her footsteps were very slow. Her feet didn't make any sound when she stepped on the ground. You. Seeing that Yun Jian didn't retreat, Mira was stunned. However, Mira quickly reacted and threatened Yun Jian again. "Let me tell you, my father is about to form an alliance with the kosher mercenaries. If you dare to do anything to me today, all of you will die. I will pull out all of your tendons and peel off all of your skin." Myra's threat caused the surrounding people to cry out in surprise. Europe's arms industry tycoon was about to form an alliance with the kosher mercenaries? Then, just as everyone was thinking of this, an ice-cold, enchanting female voice that sounded like the sound of nature reached everyone's ears. Chapter 1299. Yun Jian's words were extremely high profile this time. She did not use kosher mercenaries but my kosher mercenaries. The former could give people a feeling of yes or no, but the latter was an absolute tone. Her kosher mercenaries was the only person who had the right to say that. Even the higher-ups of kosher mercenaries, Elder Snake Lizard and Elder Tiger Leopard, did not have the right. The only person who had the right was the boss of kosher mercenaries. At the same time, other than those around her, no one had ever seen her face. She was the #1 secret agent on the International Secret Agent ranking, Slaying God, who possessed exquisite assassination skills. Someone once said that if they could meet Slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the International Secret Agent ranking,
do you really think that
one's
people
life
would
would
believe
not
that
be
you're
in
slaying
vain?
God just because
Of course,
you spout nonsense?
these were the words of those who had come
A
into
mocking
contact
male
with this
voice
Tao.
came out of
An
nowhere.
ordinary person might
He
not
wanted
even
to
know
continue,
about the
but just
secret
as the
agent
words were
ranking and
about to leave
assassin's
his mouth,
ranking, let
a
alone
small
the rest.
flying dagger was
It could be
flung
said
from where
that
her
Yun
father
Jian
was
was to the
man
man
with
who
kosher
spoke.
mercenaries
The
was
flying
Myra's
dagger
biggest
flew
trump
out of
card.
Yun Jian's hand
However,
and entered the
after she
man's mouth the
revealed her
moment he
biggest
opened
trump
it,
card,
piercing it.
Yun Jian's
The
reply
man's
was all
mouth
she
was
got.
pierced by the
My
flying
kosher
dagger and blood
mercenaries?
splattered everywhere.
Here.
Although he
You're
was
the
not
boss
dead,
of kosher
the man
mercenaries?
fainted from the
No,
sudden
how is
pain
that
that he did not
possible?
even have time to react
Myra's
to.
expression
Yun
changed
Jian spoke to
drastically.
Qin Yu, who had just
Myra's
rushed
face
over
turned
and was
extremely
standing behind
pale
her
in front of
Qin
everyone's
Yu,
eyes.
kill that blabbermouth.
Everyone who was standing
the two
around
words
was
Qin Yu
shocked.
made
This little
everyone's
girl
eyes
was
widen. She was the boss of kosher mercenaries? How was that possible? If she was the boss of kosher mercenaries, then she was the #1 secret agent on the International Secret Agent ranking. Slaying God. Slaying God? She was slaying God. Slaying God. You're slaying God. The people around her exclaimed in shock. Yun Jian's words were like a ticking time bomb that exploded in an instant. Slaying God, what kind of existence was she? He was simply a legendary figure. Since Slaying God's debut, many international businessmen and politicians had been quietly killed. There was even a saying in the underworld that went like this: those who were targeted by Slaying God would feel as if the Grim Reaper had his hands on their necks. None of them had ever imagined that such a person would one day stand in front of them alive. Doya and Charlotte also recovered from the deep despair they felt when they saw Maina's death. The two of them looked at Yun Jian in disbelief after hearing what the crowd said. Slaying God? Doya and Charlotte were stunned. They were completely dumbfounded. Doya and Charlotte would never have dreamed that it was because they were kind enough to save Yun Jian 2 days ago. Even if Yun Jian didn't need it, just this one move was enough to change their fates completely. What slaying God? Look at how old you are. How dare you claim that the kosher mercenaries are yours? Do you think others won't say such nonsense? Chapter 1300. Qin Yu's name was well known in the underworld as well because she was Slaying God's follower and she was a master of poison. How skillful was Qin Yu when it came to poisoning? For example, Qin Yu could brush past a person within 3 meters. She did not even have to lift her hand and she could poison the person who brushed past her without anyone noticing. She could make people die without anyone knowing. That was Qin Yu's ability. It was because of this terrifying ability that the people in the underworld feared Qin Yu, second only to Slaying God. This was because Slaying God had killed her openly while Qin Yu could kill a person in such a way that the person would not even know why he died. This was the power of poison techniques. Slaying God was the one who made Qin Yu famous. Could be said that other than Snake, Lizard and Tiger, Leopard from the kosher mercenaries, Qin Yu was one of the few who could follow Slaying God and even see her face. Moreover, Qin Yu was always by Slaying God's side. She would not listen to anyone else other than Slaying God. Therefore, when they heard Yun Jian address the girl behind her as Qin Yu, the people around them were shocked. After the shock, it was followed by endless terror and fear. Oh my God! Slaying God is her. It's really her. Someone could not help exclaiming. Just as he exclaimed, however, he covered his mouth in fright, afraid that Yun Jian would hear what he said. Myra's legs were shaking from fear. Mira had never met anyone who was more powerful than her father, so she had always been fearless. Until just now she was completely terrified. She still remembered her father telling her that she should not offend these two people in the underworld. If she did, they would annihilate the entire armaments family. One of them was Slaying God, who ranked first on the secret agent leaderboard, while the other was Hun's leader. However, Mira had always thought that it was impossible for her to meet them. When she heard that Yunjian was Slaying God, she felt like her world had collapsed. At this moment, Yunjian had already walked up to Mira. She stretched out her hand and grabbed Mira's long hair. The group of bodyguards around Mira, including Mira's man, didn't even dare to let out a fart. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They watched as Yunjian pulled Mira's long hair and pulled Mira's face in front of her. Chi. From afar, Qingyu poured out a bottle of dissolving water and turned the unconscious man into a puddle of blood before everyone's eyes. There was a horrifying sound of dissolving chemicals. Who else in the world could use a bottle of liquid to turn a person into a pool of blood? Qingyu's performance had proven her identity in front of everyone. She was Qingyu, Elder Qingyu of the Kosha mercenaries. At the same time, she was also known as the Poison Lady by outsiders. Yunjian dragged Mira to witness the man's body turning into a puddle of blood after Qingyu poured a bottle of liquid on him. Usually Mira would not be frightened by such a gory scene, but it was different now. Now that she was being suppressed by Yunjian, the fact that Yunjian was showing her such a gory scene was, "Do you want to have a taste?" Yunjian forced Mira to watch the scene. She was already next to Mira, her lips close to Mira's ears as she whispered something that scared Mira out of her wits. No. Although Mira liked to kill, she was completely terrified when it came to the moment where she would be killed. Yunjian did not wait for Mira to finish. Her lips curled into a sinister smirk that was as eerie as the Grim Reaper from hell. She grabbed Mira's back with her right hand and flung her face and chest to the ground. Mira was flung to the ground directly, her nose smashing into the ground. Mira was terrified. Just as she was about to stand up, she felt a strong foot stepping on her back. Then she was firmly pressed down, not allowing her to get up. Above her back, Yunjian's decisive voice rang, "Shuiying, get me a saw. I'll cut off her limbs with my own hands today." His words were extremely calm, but the words he said were enough to frighten people. However, that was not everyone's focus. Shuiying, one of the 4 leaders of the Hun organization. Someone's eyes widened after hearing Yunjian's words. Shuiying lowered his head at Yunjian and replied respectfully, "Yes. Oh my God. The 4 leaders of the Hun organization are here too." Someone's face turned pale with fright. Not long after Shuiying left, a few female silhouettes came from afar. When the leader saw Mira under Yunjian's foot, he sprinted over and could not stop himself from calling out, "Mira? Oh my God." Yunjian looked up and saw Hina, Maggie and the rest who she met in the hot spring running over. The one who shouted was the arrogant Hina. When Yunjian entered a hot spring, Hina sent Maggie to chase her away and even wanted to kill her. Now that she saw Hina and Maggie, Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Not long after, Hina, Maggie and the rest stood in front of Yunjian. Hina saw Yunjian stepping on Mira, and her expression changed drastically. She did not know what was going on, so when she saw Yunjian's action, she scolded Yunjian directly. Chapter 1301. Hina also became friends with Mira 2 days ago. Although Mira looked down on Hina at the beginning, after seeing that Hina had connections in Kosha mercenaries and in Hun organization, she started to talk to Hina more. Mira's father told her to make more useful friends, and Mira always kept it in mind, so she forced herself to talk to Hina more. This made Hina think that she had successfully become friends with Mira. When she saw Mira being stepped on by Yunjian, Hina wanted to flatter Mira, so she rushed in and threatened Yunjian with Mira and her status. In this world where the strong were respected, strength and status represented everything. Hina also believed that if she said so, Yunjian would definitely be scared and let go of her foot. But what Hina didn't expect was that Yunjian didn't let go of her foot. Instead, after hearing Hina's threat, she stepped harder on Mira's back. Mira was being stepped on by this foot and kept howling. But now she didn't even have the courage to beg for mercy. "Did you hear what I said? Why aren't you letting go of your dirty feet? I've seen a lot of rookies like you who think you're great, but actually just mixed in our circle. If you let go of your foot now, I can still leave you a whole corpse. Otherwise." Hina looked at Yunjian as if she was a senior looking at a new rookie. Hina thought that she had been in this circle for 5 or 6 years. What kind of things had she not seen? People like Hina, she wasn't a professional killer trained by an organization. Usually, Professional killers trained by an organization, if they could come out alive from the organization, they must be at the level of a senior killer or an agent. In this world, some people started to come into contact with the circle of killers or agents when they were 15 or 16 years old, almost approaching adulthood, and started to practice their skills. Hina started to train when she was 15 or 16 years old. Think about it, Hina started to train when she was 15 or 16 years old, and she only learned the killer moves. It was different from someone like Yun Jian who grew up among the dead and had to kill others in exchange for her survival, a secret agent assassin who grew up in actual combat. Could be compared like this: one was the real deal and the other was just a cheap pirated version. Hina herself started to train and learn killer moves around Yun Jian's age, so she naturally thought that Yun Jian was just a rookie. She had probably just started to mingle in this circle, hadn't she? How dare he be so arrogant in front of me? Before Hina finished her words, some lackeys beside her, led by Maggie, had started to echo her words. Exactly. That's right. Our sister Sheena has thousands of ways to make you die miserably. Moreover, Sister Sheena has people in the Inhun organization and kosher mercenaries. If you know what's good for you, kneel down and beg for mercy. Then we can give you a good death. Otherwise we'll kill you. Maggie and the others looked at Yun Jian with hatred, as if they couldn't wait to tear Yun Jian into pieces. Maggie even thought in her heart that she shouldn't have let Yun Jian go just because she owed Doya a favor. Seeing this, Doya and Charlotte clenched their fists tightly. At this moment, a mellow male voice was heard. Before everyone could react, the owner of the mellow male voice was already standing beside Yun Jian. Yi looked at Shui Ying, who just came back with the saw, and stood beside him silently. He said to Shui Ying in front of everyone with a slight anger. Chapter 1302. Yi couldn't tolerate having sand in his eyes. The reason why Inhun was able to achieve what it had today was due to the strict implementation of Inhun's own rules. Normally, Yi could joke around with the 4 leaders of the Inhun organization, but when it came to critical moments, he wouldn't allow a single mistake to happen. Moreover, the Inhun organization had its own rules. Everyone in the organization wasn't allowed to be related. The meaning of this rule was that anyone who belonged to the Inhun organization wasn't allowed to use the name of the organization to cause trouble. It meant that no outsiders were allowed to use the words "I know someone from the Inhun organization" to swagger around in the circle. It was obvious that the man Hina mentioned was from the Inhun organization, and she was using this to her advantage. This was something Yi couldn't tolerate. The members of Inhun would definitely be protected by the organization. However, if they were to flaunt their prowess on the international stage just because they were slightly related to Inhun, they were basically using Inhun's name to swindle people everywhere. Yi had severely suppressed this a long time ago. This was something he couldn't tolerate. Yes, young master. Shuang was sweating for Lin Wei. Si Yi rarely spoke with anger. In fact, Shuang knew that the anger in Si Yi's tone this time was because someone was targeting Yun Jian in the name of an Hun group. That was why Si Yi was so angry. The only person who could make Si Yi emotional was Yun Jian. If this matter didn't involve Yun Jian, even if the Hun organization was destroyed, Shuang reckoned that Si Yi's expression wouldn't change at all. Thus, when comparing the Hun organization to Yun Jian, Shuang reckoned that in Si Yi's heart, even if there were hundreds of billions of Hun organization, they wouldn't be able to compare to Yun Jian. Thinking of this, Shuang deepened his thoughts of going to Yun Jian to flatter her. He felt that he needed to plan for Mo Senya to go with him to flatter Yun Jian. Thinking of this, Shuang dialed Ling Wei's communicator and ran to the side to talk. He left behind a group of dumbfounded people. The people standing around had been there since Yun Jian's identity as slaying god was exposed. They had witnessed the entire process. Hina, Maggie, and the others were all aware of their performance, and they all thought that Hina, Maggie, and the others were doomed. However, no one expected the man standing next to slaying god to order Shuang, one of the 4 leaders of an Hun, in such a tone. And most importantly, Shuang was actually obedient. Then this meant that, could it be that this young man he's the leader of an Hun? Someone cried out in astonishment, which struck everyone's hearts in an instant. Everyone's faces turned pale. Hearing what Si Yi said, the people around them felt the urge to flee as quickly as possible. However, due to fear they were rooted to the ground like nails. There was a rumor that anyone who met an Hun's leader would be killed by the organization. Even if they managed to escape, they would be hunted down by an Hun. In other words, they would die without a doubt. Hina, Maggie, and the others who were still acting all high and mighty earlier, fell apart in an instant. Especially Hina, who had just boasted that her man was from an Hun. In the end, Yun Jian's man was the leader of an Hun who had never shown his face. This couldn't be real, right? A Kosha mercenary's boss and an Hun's leader. They're a perfect match. I'm afraid there's no one else in this world who's more compatible than them. Just as Hina was in disbelief, a voice from the side sent her to the bottom of the valley. The Kosha mercenary's boss? Slaying God? Slaying God, the #1 secret agent in the international ranking? Chapter 1303. Yin Jian. It was slaying God. Hina's expression changed drastically at the sudden realization. She was terrified. Had she offended an Hun's leader and the boss of Kosha mercenaries just to please Mira? Just as she was thinking about it, Yun Jian's voice was heard. Shuang, have you brought the saw? It's here. Shuang obeyed. He quickly brought the saw in his hand to Yun Jian and passed it to her. The saw was used by farmers to chop down trees. It was only a matter of time before it could be used to cut off a person's leg. Of course, if one were to use this saw to cut off a person's leg without anesthetics, it would be a fate worse than death. Yun Jian took the saw and placed it gently on Myra's fair-skinned legs under her shorts. She gently slid down, and the sharp saw cut Myra's fair and smooth thigh, causing blood to gush out. No, sob. Mira was trembling in fear. However, Yun Jian stepped on her back so hard that she could not move at all. Yun Jian bent down and patted Myra's face gently in front of everyone. Then, her soft voice came from above Mira. This saw is quite sharp. It's perfect for sawing off your legs and hands. I'll cut off your legs first, then your hands, and then dig out your heart. Let's do it slowly. Don't rush, okay? Yun Jian sounded like she was talking to herself, but Mira was scared out of her wits when she heard it. No, I was wrong. I shouldn't have killed that woman. I'll do whatever you want me to. How about? I'll ask my father to stop allying with your kosher mercenaries as long as you don't kill me. Don't kill me. It was Myra's first time experiencing the fear of death. She could clearly feel Maina's struggle before she died. However, the main character this time was Mira herself. Before Mira could finish her sentence, Yun Jian had already raised the saw and slashed it on Myra's thigh. Mira almost fainted from the sudden pain. However, Yun Jian held Myra's philtrum tightly to prevent her from passing out. At this moment, Mira would rather pass out. Yun Jian. Just as Yun Jian was about to cut off Myra's leg with the saw, a weak voice was heard. Yun Jian turned and saw Doya looking at her with a pale face. Yun Jian stopped what she was doing and turned to look at Doya. However, Doya paused. Then she mustered up her courage and said to Yun Jian, she killed Na. I want to avenge Na. I'll kill Mira. Even after knowing Yun Jian's identity, Doya could still look at her openly. Although she was slightly fearful, she was braver than most of the men here since she stood out after knowing Yun Jian's identity. Yes, we'll kill Mira. Charlotte clenched her fists tightly. Her eyes were red, but she resisted the urge to cry out loud. She looked at Yun Jian like Doya. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes when she heard the voices. She looked at Doya and Charlotte's enthusiasm. She liked it very much. Chapter 1304. After Yun Jian finished speaking, she looked down at Mira, who was under her feet. Mira didn't faint because Yun Jian had pinched her philtrum. All Yun Jian wanted was for Mira to be in so much pain that she wished she was dead. With a gentle flick of her hand, she swung the saw at Doya and Charlotte without even lifting her head to look at the pair. Doya reached out and caught the saw that Yun Jian had tossed over. She grabbed the saw and rushed towards Mira with red eyes. Doya grabbed the saw and rushed to Mira, shouting, "Go to hell!" In the next second, Doya grabbed the saw and slashed at Myra's thigh. With a few forceful slashes, one of Myra's thighs was cut off. The leg was completely separated from Myra's body. Mira instantly howled in pain because Yun Jian had pinched Myra's philtrum. Mira couldn't resist at all. Her screams pierced through the sky, but no one cared. After Doya chopped off one of Myra's legs, she suddenly remembered that Maina was humiliated to death by Mira. When Maina's chest was cut open, the people around her didn't have any sympathy. The men even whistled as they watched happily. Doya raised the saw and was about to chop off Myra's other leg when Charlotte frantically snatched the saw away. After Myra's arms and legs were chopped off, she couldn't wake up even after pinching her philtrum. She completely fainted. Yun Jian stood aside and watched as Doya and Charlotte sawed off Myra's limbs and chopped her into pieces. It was only when Mira breathed her last that Doya and Charlotte stood before Yun Jian with their hands clasped. Myra's death could at most avenge Maina, but Maina was dead. Myra's death could not bring Maina back to life. Yun Jian lowered her eyes. She didn't turn around. Si was standing behind Yun Jian. He reached out and pulled Yun Jian into his embrace, then ordered Shuang, "Kill everyone here." That didn't include Doya and Charlotte. Shuang naturally knew what was going on. "What? You actually want to kill us? Why?" When some people heard Si Yi's words, their expressions changed drastically, and they all began to turn and flee frantically. With Shui Ying's ability, even if everyone present worked together, they still wouldn't be a match for him. Moreover, anyone who was targeted by the leader of Anhun would definitely die. Encountering such a situation, it was impossible for them not to run. Every one of them ran faster than anyone else. When Qingyu saw this, she helped Shuang to kill all those who were trying to escape. The one thing Hina regretted the most before she died was that she didn't care about anything and rushed to help Mira. But in the end she got herself killed. She regretted provoking Yun Jian. This devil. There were corpses everywhere, but Yun Jian and Si Yi's expressions didn't change at all. To Yun Jian and Si Yi, dead people were something they were used to. This was how it was in this circle. If you weren't strong, you deserved to die. It was because Yun Jian and Si Yi were strong that those people deserved to die. Yun Jian was nestled in Si Yi's embrace. Si Yi hugged her from behind and lowered his head to sniff the faint fragrance on her body. Yun Jian extended a hand and placed it in front of Doya and Charlotte. She pursed her lips and said after a while, "Are the two of you willing to join the kosher mercenaries?" She was very satisfied with Doya and Charlotte's performance just now. If she taught them well, they would definitely become elites and talents in the underworld. Chapter 1305. Yun Jian's eyes flashed with determination. Both Doya and Charlotte were stunned. They did not expect Yun Jian to say that. "Are you two willing to join the kosher mercenaries?" Doya and Charlotte would never dream of such a good thing. They would never dream of Yun Jian inviting them to join the kosher mercenaries just because they had saved the kosher mercenaries' boss. Doya and Charlotte knew very well that they had to fight for their own success. They had never thought that they would dream of Yun Jian repaying them for saving Yun Jian. Hence, when they heard Yun Jian's words, Doya and Charlotte were stunned. If it were anyone else, they would definitely nod their head and join first before thinking about anything else. However, Doya and Charlotte did not do that. Doya lowered her head and looked at the dust on the ground. She was about to speak when she heard a voice. Just as she was about to say something, Yun Jian's voice came again. "Don't worry. I've never invited useless people to join the kosher mercenaries. I'm inviting you to join the kosher mercenaries because you have the ability to grow. As for me, I'm just a talent scout." This was what Doya and Charlotte were worried about. They were different from others. They wanted to rely on their own ability to survive in this world. They did not want to rely on their relatives, friends, or lovers to flaunt their prowess everywhere like Mira or Hina. They wanted to become stronger. Just like Yun Jian, who did not rely on anyone. "All right. I agree." Doya grinned at Yun Jian all of a sudden. "I agree too." Charlotte clenched her fists. They had to become strong so that they would not be bullied. So that they would not be like before when they could only watch helplessly as Mira killed Maina. "Then I welcome you all to join us." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and smiled, a sharp luster flashing in her eyes. Yun Jian only invited Doya and Charlotte to join. As for the others, she did not care. Yun Jian did not invite the weak. Other friends like Doya and Charlotte were not qualified to do so. Anyone that Yun Jian invited would definitely be a future powerhouse that she recognized. She wouldn't accept trash. The flower bed where Yun Jian and the others were at was quite a distance away from the venue of the tea party. At this moment, in the dance hall of the tea party, the snake lizard was already here. She was standing in the middle of the hall with her arms crossed. Many people recognized Snake Lizard's identity and came forward to express their goodwill. However, Snake Lizard did not pay any attention to him. She still maintained her cold and aloof appearance. Yo. Elder Snake Lizard, greetings. I'm Europe's arms tycoon Miro. We've met before. Last time I proposed an alliance with the kosher mercenaries. It should be about time, right? The man who called himself Miro bowed in front of Snake Lizard and spoke to her respectfully. Miro was Myra's father and was also a Europe's arms tycoon. I forgot. Snake Lizard stood there with her arms crossed. She did not even pay attention to Miro. Hearing that, Miro's face was immediately filled with awkwardness. However, he continued to move forward. However, at this moment the door suddenly opened. A beautiful teenage girl and a handsome man walked in from outside the door. A handsome man followed behind them. The handsome man held a gunny sack in one hand and threw it in front of everyone. The contents of the gunny sack rolled out. It was a body without limbs. The body was stiff but the face was intact. It was obvious who this person was. Chapter 1306. When he saw that Shuiying had thrown the corpse out of the sack, which was so cold that there was no warmth at all, and it was a corpse with 4 broken limbs. Miru had just turned his head to look curiously, but at the same time he screamed out in horror, "Ah! Daughter? My daughter. Mila." Mila had always been spoiled by Milu. She was so spoiled that she was afraid she would melt. Milu also felt that all this was natural. So when he knew that Mila had fallen in love with perverted killing methods, Milu did not stop her. Instead, he found a bunch of living people for Mila to play with. Then he used all kinds of cruel methods to kill those people. Yes, Mila had liked to kill a living person in the most cruel way since she was young. For example, when she killed Maina just now, Mila cut off Maina's chest while she was still alive. But to Mila, watching Maina's chest being cut off while she was still alive was a very fun and interesting thing. And Milu had always indulged his daughter to do this, because he had the ability to indulge his daughter to treat others like this. But when he saw his most precious daughter's limbs being broken and thrown on the ground like trash, he was shocked. And when he heard Yun Jian call his daughter, he thought, "Thing? Whose thing is this? Come out and claim it." It was just a simple statement, but Miru's initial calmness had turned into a state where he could not wait to strangle Yun Jian to death, cut her into 1,000 pieces and tear her apart. "My precious daughter, ah!" Milu screamed and roared. His whole face turned red in front of everyone's eyes. Because of his anger, Milu's whole face turned red. Yun Jian looked at Milu's extremely angry face. She narrowed her eyes and a murderous intent flashed in her eyes. Then Yun Jian hooked her finger at Milu with a hint of mockery. After Yun Jian hooked her finger at Milu, she paused for a while before continuing, "Your daughter killed my friend." Yun Jian's initial smirk was gone as she spoke, her expression turning cold all of a sudden. "So she must pay the price," Yun Jian said coldly. At this point she paused again and Yun Jian reached out her hand and pointed at Miru. "The price is, I want your position as Europe's arms tycoon," Yun Jian said arrogantly. She was arrogant because she had the right to be arrogant. She was arrogant because she had the right to be arrogant. As long as she took away Miro's position as the European arms tycoon, Yun Jian would have all of Miro's financial resources and manpower. The European arms tycoon was not an ordinary person or a small position. If Yun Jian were to obtain this position, she would definitely double the status of the kosher mercenaries internationally. Yun Jian's words caused an uproar among the crowd. In particular, the top assassins and secret agents from all over the world were all present at the scene. Yun Jian, a teenage girl, rushed in and pointed at Miru exaggeratedly, asking him to hand over the position of the European arms tycoon. Was this little girl crazy? "Ta! Little girl, why didn't you go home to find your mother to drink milk? Why did you come here to sing?" "Ah!" Someone was suddenly amused by Yun Jian, and then walked 3 meters away from Yun Jian while holding his stomach. The surrounding people were infected by this person's atmosphere and one by one they all laughed. However, the man who walked 3 meters away from Yun Jian immediately held his stomach and laughed. Yun Jian suddenly glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. She reached out her hand, and a blade flew along the track to the man's neck at a speed that could not be captured by the naked eye. One knife and the throat was sealed. The man was still laughing, but his laughter suddenly stopped, and in the next second he fell to the ground with a plop. The people who were laughing and mocking Yun Jian for being a little kid all stopped laughing instantly. Suddenly, the surroundings were silent. Chapter 1307. Just a moment ago, Miru was still growling angrily and wanted to rush forward. His delusional action of rushing forward abruptly stopped in the next second. It was because the man who mocked Yun Jian just now was killed by the flying dagger Yun Jian had thrown just like that. This young lady was definitely not as simple as she looked. Miru's impulsive desire to charge forward and kill Yun Jian on the spot was quelled at this moment. Miru was a European arms tycoon after all. The fact that he could climb to this position that countless people were waiting for meant that Miru was not someone who acted on impulse. Even if his daughter was brutally murdered, Miru could only glare viciously at Yun Jian from afar because of the power that Yun Jian had displayed earlier. Compared to Miru, the surrounding group of people were dumbfounded. The people who mocked Yun Jian along with the man who was killed earlier all shut their mouths. The place was silent. The crowd watched as Yun Jian walked toward Miru. Ce, who was walking side by side with Yun Jian, walked at the same time as well. Shuiying, who was behind them, followed as well. Qingyu, Doya and the rest did not come over. Qingyu was still contacting the kosher mercenaries to deal with the incident earlier. At this moment, someone among the crowd saw Shuiying, who was following behind Yun Jian and Ce. He's one of the 4 leaders of the Inhun group, Shuiying? The crowd was stunned when they heard this. Even Miru's eyelids twitched. Miru clenched his fists. She killed his daughter. He would never let Yun Jian go. Just as Miru was thinking this, he suddenly noticed a slender and cold silhouette walking past him. Snake. Lizard twisted her seductive body and walked toward Yun Jian under Miru's gaze. Miru's heart skipped a beat. Snake. Lizard's cold face looked at Yun Jian, who had an equally cold expression. Miru thought that Snake. Lizard had a grudge against Yun Jian. Now that Snake. Lizard was heading towards Yun Jian. Could it be? Elder Snake Lizard, as long as you kill her for me and avenge my daughter, I will give you half of my financial resources and power. Miru couldn't wait to tear Yun Jian into pieces. Therefore Miru had put in his capital this time. As long as he could kill Yun Jian, who had persecuted his poor daughter, Miru was willing to give up half of his wealth and power. Moreover, Miru knew that the condition he offered was very tempting. He was also certain that Snake. Lizard would definitely agree. After all, if the kosher mercenaries could obtain half of the forces under the European arms tycoon, it would be enough to strengthen their international standing. What's more, killing this teenage girl should be a piece of cake for Snake. Lizard, right? Miru's words did not receive any response from Snake. Lizard. However, Miru was already confident that Snake. Lizard would help him kill Yun Jian. Looking at Snake. Lizard walking towards Yun Jian while Yun Jian was frowning slightly, Miru was even more determined in his thoughts. In order to make Snake. Lizard quickly kill Yun Jian for him, Miru even shouted at Snake. Lizard, quick. Kill her quickly. Kill her. Kill her and I will give you half of my financial resources and power. Miru's face turned red. It was the kind of red that came from anger. However, just as Miru finished speaking, Yun Jian's voice rang out, I am only worth half of your arms and power? Then wouldn't it be more worth it for me to kill you and take all your forces? Yun Jian's words made everyone present confused. What nonsense was this little girl talking about? Just as they were thinking about it, Snake. Lizard had already walked in front of Yun Jian. However, before Snake. Lizard could speak, a man's figure suddenly walked in through the gate. The man glanced around and locked onto Yun Jian. The man walked over and shouted at Yun Jian, So you are here. Sister Snake. Lizard has been looking for you for a long time. The man was Mad Dragon. Chapter 1308. As soon as Mad Dragon and Snake. Lizard said that, everyone around them looked at Yun Jian in fear. Everyone stared at her. If Yun Jian's acquaintances did not know what SS meant, everyone here knew what it meant. In the underworld, there was no one else who could be called SS other than Slaying God. Moreover, Snake. Lizard called Yun Jian her sister. That man is Mad Dragon from Inhun Group. Mad Dragon only joined the kosher mercenaries recently. That means this young lady is Slaying God. In her past life, Yun Jian would attend such events as well, but every time she appeared, there would be an uproar from the crowd. Of course, other than the uproar from the small fries around them, the big shots around them narrowed their eyes and looked at Yun Jian provocatively. Miru's ability was not to be underestimated, but in an event like this, his status was at the bottom. Therefore, when he heard that Yun Jian was slaying God, he recalled how he had asked Snake. Lizard to kill Yun Jian. Miru felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and he stood rooted to the ground. Looking at the bewildered looks and squinting eyes of the people around her, Yun Jian was unfazed. She merely frowned. In the past, Yun Jian would use a human skin mask and an incredible disguise skill to turn herself into another person when she attended various events. Everyone in the underworld knew that, so even if they saw Yun Jian's face, no one would look for Slaying God based on Yun Jian's appearance. As time passed, no one would do such a stupid thing. Yun Jian knew that if she showed her real face today, everyone would think that she was wearing a human skin mask, and no one would be willing to investigate her face. Even if someone were to investigate, she had a way to kill them before they could track her down. In the past, the kosher mercenaries did not have the ability to do that, but now she had the ability to do it. Therefore, she did not have to disguise herself as another person anymore. Outsiders thought that she was very mysterious in her past life, but in reality, Yun Jian did not want to expose herself because she was afraid that she would not be able to protect herself after her identity was exposed. After all, the #1 position on the special agent ranking list was occupied by many powerful international figures. There were also countless people who were eyeing this position covetously. At the same time, Yun Jian had already reached her hand out to Miru. She took 2 steps toward Miru, her expression unchanged as she said, "Hand over your European firearms force obediently, and I'll leave your corpse intact." Yun Jian was never one to let her emotions get the better of her. To be honest, Yun Jian did not look for Milu today just for Maina. Maina's death was just an excuse. What Yun Jian wanted was Miru's European firearms force. Shui Ying, who was standing behind Ce, immediately knew that Ce did not intend to expose her identity when Ce glanced at him. However, compared to protecting Yun Jian, his young master was willing to do anything. Shui Ying gulped, cleared his throat gently and turned to look at the crowd. The Inhun organization has reached an agreement with the kosher mercenaries. From now on, the kosher mercenaries' business is the Inhun organization's business. Anyone who disobeys will become the Inhun organization's enemy. Shui Ying's words caused a commotion among the crowd. The strength of the Inhun organization was well known to everyone. Such a powerful organization, their armed forces could even be compared to a developed country. Fortunately, the Inhun organization had never intervened in any conflicts and had always remained neutral. However, today they had made an exception for the boss of the kosher mercenaries, slaying God. Chapter 1309. If the people present knew that this was Inhun's leader's way of expressing his love for kosher mercenaries' boss, slaying God, they would have been dumbfounded. Just now, Miru still had a trace of a fluke heart, but at this moment, it was completely crushed. Kosher mercenaries and Inhun had joined forces. Even the internationally renowned Inferno Ring was annihilated just like that, let alone a small European arms tycoon like him. It's over, it's over. My life's work. It's over just like that. Miru understood his situation very well. He reached out his hands and howled at the sky like a madman. Then Miru sat on the ground, completely paralyzed. He was done for. The European arms tycoon would have a successor, but he had offended slaying God, the boss of kosher mercenaries. Did he still have a chance to live? The people around were affected by Miru's howls and their faces turned pale with shock. "Lizard, I'll leave him to you," Yun Jian said to Snake. Lizard after squinting at Miru. "All right." Snake. Lizard nodded. Miru would not be able to escape death. It was Yun Jian's principle to eliminate the source of trouble. She would not give Miru a chance to make a comeback. Yun Jian had handed over some of the organization's matters to Snake, Lizard and Tiger. Leopard. Although she was a hands-off boss, she was still the one who handled most of the important matters personally. Yun Jian was dragged away by Ce before the third global underground tea party ended. The tea party started early in the morning and lasted until midnight. However, Yun Jian was dragged out by Ce halfway through the tea party. Everyone present noticed this, but no one dared to speak carelessly. That was slaying God. Ce did not care about Inhun's matters at all. He was even more thorough than Yun Jian in being a hands-off boss. Ce did not say a word throughout the whole process. It was Shui Ying who did what he wanted. In fact, if Yun Jian didn't attend this year's tea party, Ce definitely wouldn't have come. Of course, if Yun Jian came to participate, then everything would be different. Qingyu had just finished dealing with what had happened and walked into the ball. Seeing a mad dragon standing beside Snake. Lizard, Qingyu blinked and went over, turning to ask Snake. Lizard, Master, where's Sister Jian? Snake. Lizard turned around and was about to speak when Shui Ying, who was not far away, snatched the right to speak. Since there was no one around Shui Ying, he told Qingyu generously, "The young master has brought the young mistress out for a while." Qingyu did not pursue the matter further. Country B was surrounded by deserts. Even the lush green lawns were scarce and water was scarce. However, the location of the tea party was chosen in the most prosperous area of Country B, although the most prosperous area here was probably only the poorest area of Country Z. Chapter 1310. The fisherman's wife's words stunned Yun Jian for a moment. He said that they were husband and wife? Yun Jian was stunned. At the same time she turned to look at Ce. Ce was very tall and Yun Jian wasn't short, but she wasn't tall either. Standing beside Ce, Yun Jian felt like a little bird that was dependent on him. When Yun Jian raised her head, she could just see Ce's smooth chin. His handsome features warmed Yun Jian's heart. The fisherman's wife, who was this woman, covered her mouth when she saw this, and her smile became even more obvious. The woman smiled and reached out to pull Yun Jian onto the boat in a very hospitable manner. At the same time she said to Yun Jian, "Newlyweds, the two of you are really compatible. This young man is so handsome and dotes on you a lot. Young lady, you're really lucky." As she spoke, the woman had already pulled Yun Jian onto the boat. She even reached out to pat the back of Yun Jian's clean hand. Then she said to Yun Jian, "Sigh to think that my husband didn't treat me so well in the past. If he treated me so well, I wouldn't be able to wait to empty out everything I have for him." The woman was joking with Yun Jian. However, after hearing the woman praise Ce, Yun Jian was stunned again. She turned to look at Ce, her eyes filled with great confusion. What exactly did he say to make the fisherman's wife praise him like this? Seeing that Yun Jian had turned to look at him, Ce smiled at Yun Jian. It was the kind of smile that came from the bottom of his heart. After laughing, Ce glanced at the fisherman and his wife, who were looking at him suspiciously from the corner of his eyes. Ce curled his lips and said to the fisherman and his wife in a dialect that Yun Jian couldn't understand, "She can't leave me. She gets shy when she's 1 meter away from me." When the fisherman and his wife heard this, they said, "Oh," in a delaying tone. Then the fisherman's wife reached out to pat the back of Yun Jian's hand and said to Yun Jian in country bee's language that Yun Jian could understand, "Don't be afraid. Auntie and uncle aren't bad people." With that, the fisherman's wife praised Ce a few more times. Yun Jian was baffled by what she heard. She really wanted to know what Ce had said to the fisherman and his wife. However, in front of the fisherman and his wife, the fisherman's wife, "Es paddles paddles as paddle, and or nots paddle as paddles." Whenever Ce said a few words, the fisherman's wife would turn to Yun Jian and praise Ce. Yun Jian didn't really understand. Instead, she turned to glare at Ce with a pout, but what she got in return was Ce's innocent handsome face. This was the first time that Yun Jian had suffered a setback. She had never been fooled like today because she didn't understand the local dialect. There were many local dialects in the world. Chapter 13:11. The fisherman's wife's words caused Yun Jian's face to turn bright red. Ce didn't reply, but she enjoyed this feeling very much. When the fisherman's wife saw that Yun Jian was shy, she walked over and pulled Yun Jian to the other side of the boat. At the stern of the boat, which was 3 meters away from Ce and the fisherman, she pulled Yun Jian's hand and whispered to Yun Jian, "Little girl, don't be shy. Little girl, don't be shy and don't think that Auntie is long-winded. You don't know, but the man that Auntie teaches is the only one in our town who doesn't cheat. Auntie sees that we hit it off, so Auntie will teach you how to discipline men." As she spoke, the fisherman's wife looked over at Ce, who was sitting at the bow of the boat, and the fisherman's figure, who was paddling. When she saw that Ce and the fisherman weren't looking over, the fisherman's wife began to teach Yun Jian her sure-kill technique. The fisherman's wife moved her head closer to Yun Jian's ear, and Yun Jian didn't resist. Then the fisherman's wife's words slowly drifted out. "Auntie is telling you women you can do whatever you want, but once you're in bed, you have to serve your man with all your might. Don't be shy." Yun Jian was listening to everything the fisherman's wife said, but once she thought of herself and Ce after she finished listening to them, Yun Jian's face couldn't help but turn red and her heart thumped wildly. When the fisherman's wife pulled Yun Jian back to the bow of the boat, where Ce and the fisherman were, and personally handed Yun Jian's hand to Ce, the fisherman's wife looked at Yun Jian with a "you and I know" look. She just wanted Yun Jian and Ce to have fun in bed. When she thought of this, Yun Jian lowered her head, and her face turned even redder. "What did you guys talk about?" To make matters worse, Ce was going to whisper in Yun Jian's ear. "Nothing." Ce went to Yun Jian's ear. Yun Jian was numbed by the airflow from Ce's words, and she gently pushed Ce. "Xiao Jian, you've become naughty." Ce smirked as he stared at her. His stare made Yun Jian even more bashful. At this time, the boat went into a cave, and the fisherman and his wife stood in front of the boat, rowing. Both of them were very careful when they passed through the cave. After all, if they made a mistake, it was very likely that they would capsize in the cave. After all, there were a lot of sizes and they were very united. People's rescue was the fisherman's life. However, if the boat capsized in the cave, the vagrants would not be able to see it at all, even if they screamed for help. Therefore, the fisherman and his wife were rowing the boat seriously with their backs facing Yunjian and Ce. The moment they passed the cave, Ce suddenly bent down and pressed Yunjian's head with one hand while he pulled Yunjian's head closer to him with the other. Chapter 13:12. The fisherman's wife's question made Yunjian, who had straightened her back, shake her head and answer, "I didn't hear you." Yunjian was the most obedient now. Ce's heart itched at the sight. He felt like he should hold Xiao Jian in his arms and not let anyone see her beauty. Because her beauty was his. It could only be his. It's probably the fishes in the stream kissing in heat. There's a lot of fishes in this stream. It's summer now and the fishes are all out. They're in heat now. The fisherman explained with a laugh. Then he rowed the oar again. There was no end to the stream, but the spot where the fisherman and his wife usually rowed and fished was already at the end. Since the fisherman and his wife did not know if there would be other dangers over there, they did not plan to continue rowing. You too have to live a good life. When they bid farewell to Yunjian and Ce, the fisherman and his wife leaned against each other affectionately as they watched Yunjian and Ce and waved at them. The fisherman's wife said in a friendly manner. The fisherman and his wife were adamant that they did not want a single cent from Yunjian and Ce. They even said that they were bringing Yunjian and Ce along the way. Yunjian and Ce thanked the fisherman and his wife. When they were about to leave, the fisherman's wife even asked them to stay with a grin. "You two really don't need to stay at my place for a night. My house's soundproofing is really the best within a 10-mile radius." The fisherman's wife's words made Yunjian blush again. Ce turned down the offer without hesitation. It was only then that Yunjian and Ce headed back. Since Yunjian and Ce had come out in the afternoon, it took them almost the entire afternoon to travel from upstream to downstream. When they returned to the ball, it was already time for dinner. However, Yunjian and Ce did not plan to have dinner here. They planned to return to Country Z's Longmen City directly. Ce had sent a helicopter to return to Country Z with Yunjian. Snow Eagle, Snake, Lizard, and Mad Dragon had to stay and return the next day after the ball ended. Before they left, Yunjian met Doya and Charlotte. Doya and Charlotte had simply covered Maina's body with a white cloth and tried their best to piece her together. The parts that were damaged by Mira could never be recovered. When Yunjian went to meet Doya and Charlotte, both of them were kneeling in front of the white cloth that covered Maina's body without uttering a word. Yunjian went over and gently placed her hands on Doya and Charlotte's shoulders. After 2 seconds of silence, she said, "Only when you become stronger can you protect the people you want to protect." Hearing Yunjian's voice, Doya turned to look at her. Doya could hear the slight sadness in her voice. Doya asked in return, "You're so strong. Will there be times when you can't protect the people you want to protect?" Chapter 13:13. If Yunjian lowered her head to look at Charlotte, she could see the glint of clarity in the girl's eyes that glinted in determination. Charlotte forced herself to sound normal, but her hoarse voice betrayed her emotions. She clenched her fists tightly as she stared at Maina's body that was covered by the white cloth. Suddenly, a teardrop silently flowed down from the corner of Charlotte's eye, sinking into the dust. She shed tears because of Maina's death and for herself who was still living in such a cruel world. "Yunjian, I'll definitely become a powerhouse. I'm grateful that you've avenged Maina and given Doya and I the chance to join the kosher mercenaries." Charlotte wiped her tears away and stood up. She turned around and looked straight at Yunjian. "You don't have to thank me. You should be thanking yourself." Yunjian gave Charlotte a nonchalant smile before she turned and walked out. She did not help Doya and Charlotte for no reason. Doya and Charlotte were good seedlings. She allowed them to join the kosher mercenaries to nurture them so that they could be used by the kosher mercenaries in the future. She was not a saint. Of course, if Doya and Charlotte betrayed the kosher mercenaries one day, she promised that she would kill them personally. Not all of the international bigwigs were present at this underground tea party, but it was undeniable that many bigwigs were present. Yunjian and Ce did not join the party and left the rest to Snake, Lizard, Qingyu and Shuang. Ce sent a helicopter to bring Yunjian back to Country Z overnight. It took some time to return to Country Z. Other than the pilot, there were only Yunjian and Ce in the helicopter. At this moment, the pilot of the helicopter was like a blind and deaf person. He didn't dare and wouldn't turn his head to look behind him. Of course, this fueled a certain someone's ambition. Ce sat beside Yunjian, his body pressed tightly against Yunjian's side, enjoying the girl's soft and beautiful touch. When Ce leaned over, Yunjian's cheeks flushed. When Ce's large palm covered her small hand, Yunjian stepped back slightly since the pilot was still sitting in front of them. Yunjian's shyness tickled Ce's heart. Ce grabbed Yunjian's hand and pulled her into his embrace. Xiao Jian. Ce's low, magnetic voice rang. Yunjian was pulled into Ce's embrace. Feeling Ce's firm chest, she thought it was his fresh scent. Since there were other people around, she pushed Ce. Don't. There's someone here. Yunjian's voice was even more misleading. Just as she said that, Ce pressed Yunjian's head down and kissed her on the lips. No one saw the murderous glint that flashed across the pilot's eyes in the pilot's seat. In the next second, just as Ce kissed Yunjian, the pilot flipped his hand and a machete appeared in his hand. Chapter 13-14. The pilot's actions were so sudden that there was no time to react. However, Ce, who had just kissed Yunjian, suddenly reacted. He immediately moved away from Yunjian's tender lips and kicked the pilot viciously towards the left side of the helicopter door. Yunjian had already reacted. She followed closely behind Ce and pulled open the helicopter door at the same time. The pilot who had tried to assassinate Yunjian and Ce had never expected that Yunjian and Ce would still be so vigilant despite being so lovey-dovey. Yunjian pulled open the helicopter door at the same time. The pilot was kicked out of the helicopter by Ce. Then the pilot fell from a few thousand meters in the air like a kite with a broken string. Yunjian could only hear a blood-curdling scream before it disappeared into the clouds. No one had expected the pilot to suddenly assassinate her and Ce. However, Yunjian and Ce weren't surprised. They were already used to such a life. However, what shocked Yunjian was that she hadn't discussed this with Ce beforehand. The two of them had actually worked together to kick the pilot out of the helicopter door. Just as he was thinking about this, a series of rapid beeping sounds suddenly rang out. Yunjian's eyes darkened and her expression changed slightly. Ce's tall figure was already in the pilot's seat. His slender fingers were typing a series of English buttons on the helicopter's controls. Ce's expression darkened slightly. This helicopter has been injected with the latest bomb. In 2 minutes and 49 seconds, it will ignite the engine and explode on the spot. Since the pilot had dared to assassinate Yunjian and Ce in the helicopter, he must have been prepared to die. There were many puppet assassins in this world. These puppet assassins were trained by certain organizations or important figures. These puppet assassins had been thoroughly brainwashed. At the same time, their greatest characteristic was that they were willing to sacrifice their own lives in order to kill their targets. This was because they had been implanted with the belief that sacrifice was glorious. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to understand this. However, these puppet assassins only obeyed their master's orders. The pilot had most likely listened to someone's orders and was determined to die together with Ce and Yunjian. Yunjian skillfully searched the helicopter for a parachute but didn't find anything. There are no parachutes here, Yunjian said. However, she wasn't surprised. Since someone wanted her and Ce dead, they definitely wouldn't have prepared a parachute for them. This helicopter had been sent directly by An Hun's organization by Ce. This also meant one thing. An Hun was a traitor. But this wasn't the time to talk about it. I'll force the helicopter to the lowest point and prepare to jump off, Ce said as he skillfully controlled the helicopter to descend. Ce and Yunjian both knew how to pilot a helicopter. For people like them, piloting a helicopter was just a basic lesson. Okay, Yunjian nodded after hearing Ce's words. At this moment, the helicopter's door opened. Yunjian stood in front of the door and grabbed the handle. In just a short while, Ce had forced the helicopter to descend from a few thousand meters to a few hundred meters above the ground. There's a lake over there. We'll jump on the count of 3. Ce changed the direction of the helicopter to a lake. Then he stood behind Yunjian and wrapped his arms around her waist. At this moment, there were still 10 seconds before the bomb exploded. This was the fastest speed possible. They had to control the helicopter and jump from a few thousand meters above the ground in less than 3 minutes. If it was someone else, they would have been at a loss. Chapter 13-15. 3. Ce started counting. Just as Ce counted to 3, he suddenly changed his tone and changed the number from 3 to 1. As he spoke, Ce hugged Yunjian's slender waist from behind and jumped down from the helicopter with Yunjian in his arms. At this moment, they were less than 10 meters away from the surface of the lake. The bomb on the helicopter was about to explode. If Yunjian and Ce didn't jump down by now, the helicopter would explode. When a helicopter exploded, there would be a strong momentum. If one was not dozens of meters away from the helicopter, it was very likely that one would be directly blown to death by the momentum of the helicopter explosion. Even if they were tens of meters away, it wasn't guaranteed that they would be safe. Therefore, they had to jump down before the bomb exploded. Otherwise, the probability of death was as high as 99.9%. The moment Ce hugged Yunjian and jumped down from the helicopter, Yunjian felt that his sturdy back was shielding her from any danger. Ce purposely stood with his back facing Yunjian and jumped down from the helicopter. Just a few seconds after they jumped down, the helicopter behind them that was smashing towards the center of the lake exploded. There was also a deafening boom sound, which scared the surrounding residents into thinking that it was an earthquake. One by one they ran out of their homes. Ce groaned. He hugged Yunjian's body tightly and jumped into the water with Yunjian. Ce's front was tightly pressed against Yunjian's back. After they fell into the water, he grabbed Yunjian's small hand and swam towards the lakeside with Yunjian. The loud explosion just now had attracted a lot of attention from the surrounding residents. Now the lakeside was filled with foreigners to Yunjian and Ce. However, no one was willing to help at this moment. After all, the locals naturally didn't dare to help these two people who came out of nowhere and caused such a huge commotion. At this moment, Ce had already pulled Yunjian to the shore as fast as she could. The people standing around were a little scared and didn't dare to step forward. This was just a village and it was 7 or 8 o'clock at night. There were no street lights around. The surrounding people were using torches to illuminate the area. It was clear that this place was not far from Country B, but Yunjian and Ce did not know where it was. However, it was clear that this place was not particularly rich at first glance. Moreover, the lighting here was still primitive torches. After Ce and Yunjian came ashore, Yunjian finally saw Ce clearly. He was still wearing the white short-sleeved shirt that Yunjian had bought for him, but at this moment, the back of the white short-sleeved shirt was already soaked in blood. Yunjian suddenly realized that when Ce jumped out of the helicopter just now, his back was facing the helicopter. Chapter 13:16. Now was not the time to talk about this. Yunjian stood up and looked around before asking in fluent English, "What's the matter? Does anyone have a knife, hot water, or a towel? Lend it to me and I'll thank you handsomely in the future." The most important thing now was to deal with the injury on Ce's back. Ce did not treat the injury on his back as an injury at all. Despite the stinging pain, Ce acted like he was not injured at all. Instead, he stood up and pulled Yunjian to check her up and down. He was relieved when he saw that Yunjian was unharmed. As for the injury on his back, it was nothing. Yunjian asked in English because she did not know where they were. English was the world's common language. No matter how poor this place was, there should be someone who knew English. In spite of it, Yunjian was right. There was someone who knew English here. Just as Yunjian finished her question, a young girl around the age of 12 or 13 came out and told Yunjian in the same English as she looked at Yunjian, "Jejia, I have one at home. Let's go to my house." The girl was pretty with big eyes and a small nose, but she was dressed in rags. Thanks." Yunjian nodded and followed the girl to her house with Ce. Yunjian used a knife to remove all the shrapnel from Ce's back and treated all his wounds. The strands of hair that flew out from the explosion of the helicopter were so strong that they sank into Ce's back. The wound was deep as well. If an ordinary person were to suffer such a severe injury, they would have died long ago. When Yunjian treated Ce's wounds, he kept his head turned to look at her. Even when the pain was unbearable, he did not cry out. When Yunjian used the crude equipment as surgical tools for the operation, Ce suddenly told Yunjian, "Xiaojin, let's get married." Yunjian was stunned. Then she said, "We're not at the age of marriage yet." Moreover, hadn't they already signed a marriage contract in the Yulong continent? Yunjian's cheeks flushed slightly. "Let's go abroad to get a marriage certificate. Country will be enough." Ce listed a bunch of countries where girls could get married at the age of 16. In the end, Ce said, "When we're of age, we'll go back to Country Z to get a marriage certificate." He couldn't wait to pluck her beauty. Yunjian lowered her head, but she was actually avoiding Ce's gaze out of shyness. After a while, Yunjian said softly, "Okay. As long as you get better soon, we'll get married." Yunjian agreed. He was already so hurt because of her. She thought about what Ce had done for her. Yunjian felt that she would give Ce anything she wanted. Although the tools were temporary and could not even be considered surgical tools, the operation was a success. Just as Yunjian came out of the straw hut, the little girl who had lent her the tools came up to her. "Jejia, brother should be all right, right?" the girl asked obediently. "He's fine," Yunjian said and thanked her. Yunjian saw that the straw hut was filled with people. No doubt they were all here to watch the show. When she came back just now, Yunjian asked the girl where they were. Yunjian also found out that they were in Country B, but they were about to leave the country. It was the border between country B and another country. Just as the girl finished her question, a careless and ugly woman came out from the side. Glaring at the girl fiercely, she walked over and grabbed the girl's ear, scolding her in country B's language that Yun Jian could understand. Chapter 13-17. The woman was very ugly. Her face was covered with red pimples and her nose was flat. She was so fat that she looked like a woman who could barely walk. She grabbed the little girl's ear and scolded her. Then she slapped the little girl in front of everyone. The slap caused the little girl to fall to the ground. There were no dialects in this village. Everyone used country B's language to communicate. Therefore, Yun Jian could understand the discussions of the people around her. After seeing the little girl being slapped by the woman in front of everyone, the surrounding people began to whisper. However, Yun Jian heard everything. Lily is really pitiful. She lost her mother when she was young. Her father is really too much. He didn't take care of Lily since she was young and didn't earn money to support the family. All these years, Lily went out to work to earn money for the family's expenses. What the hell is going on? Her father doesn't earn money and goes out to play every day. That's fine, but he even married a hag. So this way, not only does Lily have to earn money herself, she also has to be beaten every day. Isn't that right? Do you know about this? 2 days ago, this hag accepted the betrothal gift from the neighboring village's village chief, Lameda. Hey, you don't know. Lameda is already 56 years old. One of his feet is already near the edge of his coffin. Lily is only 13 years old. If Lily marries him. Lily was the little girl who kindly brought Yun Jian and Ce home and provided Yun Jian with the things she needed to complete the surgery. She even arranged for Yun Jian and Ce to stay in the thatched hut. Lily's clothes were very simple. At most, they could only cover some of the important parts of her body. It was already unimaginably tattered. After hearing the words of the surrounding people, Yun Jian finally understood Lily's background and situation. Yun Jian would never forget that Lily had helped her just now. Talk. What nonsense. Get the hell away from me. Lily's stepmother, who was also known as the hag, turned her head and shouted at the crowd, cursing them with a few words of abuse. After scolding, the woman turned her head and twisted Lily's ear. Then she turned her head to look at Yun Jian. She didn't do anything to Lily again. Instead, she said angrily to Yun Jian, "Get the hell out of my house. My family can't afford to raise you too." As she spoke, the woman scolded Lily in a low voice, "Bah, you useless thing. Don't you think you've caused enough trouble?" This time he actually dares to bring back 2 living adults for this old lady. This old lady can't afford to raise them. In fact, the family's livelihood depended on Lily moving bricks to earn money. But all the money went to Lily's stepmother, a woman named Ya. Ya was the woman's name. It was a very pleasant name, but when it was applied to a woman, it was unbearable. No. Don't drive my sister and brother away, okay? I can earn more money. I can move bricks a few more times. I can do more work. Please don't drive my sister and brother away, okay? My sister and brother fell into the river. My brother is seriously injured. They won't have anywhere to go. When Lily heard this, she immediately knelt down and begged Ya. Lily didn't call Ya mother or mother. Lily was a very kind girl. Usually, when she saw injured animals like rabbits in the mountains, she would bring them home. When the animals recovered, she would send them back to the mountains. Lily's kindness was obvious to everyone. Ya was a very vicious woman. After hearing this, she ran to the side and pulled out a long rattan. Then she rushed to Lily and waved her hand. "They're pitiful, but I'm pitiful too. You wretched girl, useless thing. This old lady will whip you to death." As soon as the last word was spoken, Ya waved the rattan vines and whipped Lily's body. Lily was so scared that she closed her eyes. But the rattan didn't succeed in whipping Lily. A pair of white little hands grabbed the rattan that was waving in the air. Chapter 13-18. Hearing Yun Jian's words, Ya's eyelids twitched violently. Especially when she saw Yun Jian's sharp eyes. Ya was fierce and unruly, but she had never seen such a terrifying murderous intent in a little girl's eyes. Those eyes stared at her as if she wanted to kill her. After all, Ya was just a little woman in country B. She was shocked by Yun Jian's stare, but then she pretended that she was not scared by Yun Jian. After Ya cleared her throat, she scolded Yun Jian back. "Why should I let go just because you asked me to? Who do you think you are? You used my knife, water, and towel, and you think you're in the right? Oh God, how can there be such a shameless person in this world?" Ya began to wail loudly in a mournful voice. However, she saw that Yun Jian had already pulled out the rattan. She waved it gently, and the rattan was directly caught by Yun Jian. Then she whipped Ya hard. Ya fell to the ground after being whipped by the rattan. She took a few deep breaths. After being whipped to the ground, Ya actually did not feel any pain, but she began to shout loudly again. "Oh God! You hit me. You killed me. My good intentions are not rewarded. If you say another word, I'll kill you right now." Yun Jian's words directly interrupted Ya's crying. However, Yun Jian threw away the rattan. She directly took out a dagger from her trouser pocket, then pulled the dagger out of the scabbard and threw it at Ya. Yun Jian did not use the butterfly knife because she did not need to use it to deal with this kind of person. At that moment, the saber flew over Ya's head without missing a single bit. Ya suddenly froze in shock. She stood there in a daze. She could clearly feel the knife flying over her head. The knife flew over Ya's head and stabbed into the soil behind Ya. This unique skill shocked the group of people around. Without a doubt, Yun Jian's move just now was really amazing. However, she saw Yun Jian pull Lily aside and walk to the side. Ya was frightened by Yun Jian. She didn't dare to make another move. At this time, Yun Jian had already pulled Lily to her room. Lily told Yun Jian a lot of things. Of course, she also talked about her background and where they were. Lily lowered her head when she talked about her background. She said to Yun Jian, "My stepmother will sell me to someone else in a few days, but I already have someone I like." Lily said that the person she liked was also very poor. They had met when they were carrying bricks together. The boy she liked was 15 years old this year. He had gone to school before, so he knew a little English. Lily wanted to go to school, but she had no money. Therefore, when Lily knew English, she secretly learned it from the boy. Yun Jian asked Lily some questions and listened to Lily talk about her background. She closed her eyes and made up her mind. Yun Jian slept with C. The next day, Yun Jian was disturbed by a commotion outside the door. When she walked out, she saw 3 or 4 men trying to drag Lily away. At the front was an old man in his 50s or 60s with a cigar in his hand. He was old enough to be Lily's grandfather. This old man was the village chief of the neighboring village, Lameda. In this poor place, his family was very rich. "Bah, useless thing. I really can't tolerate you for a day. Hurry up and leave. It's lucky for you to be able to follow village chief Lameda." Ya cursed at Lily. It was Ya who called village chief Lameda and asked him to take Lily away quickly. Village chief Lameda had already taken a fancy to Lily. At this moment he couldn't wait to press Lily under his body and beg for pleasure. Therefore, when he heard that Ya wanted to take Lily away, he came over early in the morning. Yun Jian saw village chief Lameda calling for people to drag Lily away. Seeing this scene, Yun Jian's eyes darkened again. Just as the 3 to 4 men were about to put Lily into a sack and forcefully take her away, a sharp female voice sounded. Her voice carried an irresistible majesty.